Chapter 5:23. The sun set and the night fell. The lights in the camp were as bright as day. Thousands of elites had set up camp here. The person they were protecting was one of the most honorable people in the land, and in the future they could look forward to, it was very likely that one of the most honorable people would be removed. It was because she was the emperor's favorite daughter and the most distinguished member of the royal family during the War of Heaven's origin. From the Qin and Shang dynasties in the west to the Sui and Xia dynasties in the east, she was known by everyone in the world. As an imperial concubine, she had been appointed general of heavenly strategies by His Majesty. She was in charge of the army, courteous to the wise, and loyal to protect the country. Her virtuous reputation spread far and wide. Her reputation in the court was above that of her brothers. The only disadvantage that prevented her from becoming the crown prince seemed to be her identity as a woman and the fact that there were no precedents set by her ancestors. But this was a disadvantage, but it could also be an advantage. The ignorant masses loved a beautiful and majestic empress more. The knowledgeable officials saw the heavenly strategy princess's ambition and ability. Moreover, this woman's status would naturally gain her a group of supporters and allies. Those world-famous female grandmasters, those heroic female generals with outstanding military achievements, and those female family heads who were not inferior to men would definitely be happy to see a woman ascend to the position of Supreme Empress. She had such a great advantage that she could not be more confident. Right now, the Emperor's concubine was heading north to Ming Province. The true purpose of this trip was extremely secretive. There were only a dozen or so officials in the imperial court who knew the inside story. The soldiers in charge of protecting her naturally didn't know. They only knew that the Emperor's concubine was going to do something important to stabilize the country. Their mission was to use their lives to protect her safety and not let her be threatened at all. The guards accompanying her were selected from the army. With the Tensei seal, Empress was qualified to mobilize the troops. The troops were all heroes who had made outstanding military achievements in the War of Heaven's origin. They were experienced, had high morale, and their loyalty was guaranteed. At this moment, the camp was ablaze with lights, and all orders were carried out. Large and small patrol troops were walking through the complex and orderly camp formations, vigilant of any disturbance at all times. As for the person who was being closely protected, she was sitting in the main tent in her armor. There were huge candles lit in the tent, and the light that was as bright as day shone on her face, setting off her country-toppling beauty. The royal family's genetic modification work had been carried out continuously since the founding of the country. Regardless of whether it was in terms of appearance or talent, the result of continuous selection and elimination was the result of continuous selection and elimination, creating such a radiant talent. Her appearance was impeccable, her talent was unparalleled in the world, and her temperament was intelligent and sharp. She was the luckiest one. She was also the one with the most potential to become an emperor. Beautiful, intelligent, and powerful. Cruel, indifferent, and heartless. She was quietly reading a book. There was a stack of books on her desk, neatly folded. The pages of the book in her hand were slightly wrinkled, as if it was due to frequent flipping. All the books were like this. All the books had the same author or were about the same person. She suddenly sighed, silently, and flipped the book in her hand over to the table, revealing the words on the cover. So were manual. The strokes were like dragons and snakes, and the sharpness was as dazzling as the sky. There was only one person in the entire empire who dared to use this seemingly ordinary but extremely arrogant word as the full name of his book. Only he dared to do so, and only he could do so. Traitor, she muttered to herself. It was indeed the right choice to ban your book. You even took the opportunity to instill in a swordsmanship compendium that you have no emperor, no father, and no law. Father was right. You are essentially a lowly person. You think and act like a lowly person. Even if you have a high position, a beautiful woman, and power, your butt will still subconsciously sit on the side of the lowly people. There was clearly a large county 10 li away. There were large mansions with carved railings and painted rafters, warm and soft bedding, delicious food, and civil and military officials who wanted to curry favor with her. However, the general of heavenly strategies still chose to live in the camp and share weal and woe with the soldiers. The soldiers were so touched that they all felt that this was because the empress concubine was strict with herself and was chosen by the general. However, only she knew why this was the case. It was because she was afraid. Since she left the capital, it meant that she had put herself in danger. No, it could be said that since 2 years ago, she had already been in a dangerous situation without knowing it. Because that person was not dead. He was indeed not dead. When she got the news, it was that terrible night. She was sure that she would win, but the plan suffered a fatal blow as soon as it started. The black armored troops who went to Mingzhou to eliminate Hu Shouxin never returned. Moreover, they attracted more powerful enemies. The light on the astrolabe instantly wiped out all the life signals of the black armored troops. The scene was like a nightmare, forcing her to recall the unprecedented fiasco 2 years ago. At that time, she saw a large number of lives falling like a flood, extinguishing the sparks of a prairie fire. It was fierce, swift, decisive, cruel, and merciless. At that time, she finally realized that the foreign boy, who was inexplicably dragged here by Qijin tactical array, had turned from a coward who cried and vomited after his first battle into a terrible monster that almost no one could control. He completed the legend of one man fighting against a country. She had thought that he was already dead, or that he had suffered an injury that couldn't be healed. He could only linger in the dark. But the light on the astrolabe was even brighter than before, shattering all of his fantasies. Not only did he not suffer any injuries, he seemed to have become even more unfathomable than 2 years ago. This terrifying monster that was created with the full power of the Empire had actually become even stronger than before. How is this possible? He was clearly a single person. Only a single person. After realizing this, she almost lost her mind. After the hysterical madness, what was left was a deep fear. The unknown was the fear. It had been 2 years, and nothing had happened. That was the most terrible thing. Since he didn't die, why didn't he take revenge? Why didn't he come to the capital? Why didn't he come to kill me? Why was he hiding in the dark? What was he planning? Was he putting his terrible ideas into practice? Was he going to let those mediocre people take up weapons? Was he going to let those kneeling people stand up and be on the same level as us? Was he hiding in the dark to accumulate power, planning a terrible conspiracy, and nibbling away the foundation of the empire until the time was right to destroy Hutu? 2 years. 2 years of blankness, 2 years of no news. There was nothing more terrible than that. Because he had invincible power, because he had 6 years of martial arts cultivation and military accomplishment cultivated by the spirit of the imperial army of the ancestor, because he had knowledge and ideas from another world, and most importantly, his heart must be full of unstoppable fury, which was enough to burn the whole empire. There was nothing more terrible than the unknown. She would never believe that he had just been sightseeing in the past 2 years, because she knew Sun Lang's temperament too well. He was a man who would never take revenge overnight, not to mention this kind of old hatred that couldn't be washed away even by the water of 3 rivers and 5 rivers. Being able to make him endure quietly for 2 years only showed that his revenge would be 100 times or 1,000 times more fierce. Empress suddenly felt a trace of pain in her hand. She didn't know when, but her fingernails had been pinched into her flesh, and even a trace of blood flowed out. Now the Empire had won the Tianyuan War, and its martial arts and military achievements were enough to be recorded in history. Thousands of years later, it would become the golden age that future generations yearned for. Now the world was peaceful, and the country was prosperous. But she knew that the fiasco 2 years ago had left an irreversible injury to the empire. Now, that person was not dead, and he had come back. That was to say, this injury could be triggered by him at any time. The internal and external troubles were out of control. She suddenly felt a sense of loss and confusion. When was the bitter fruit sown? How did the situation come to this point? Would it have been better if she had chosen the other path back then? No, definitely not. He was an unstable factor. The safety of the country couldn't be based on his kindness. There was no guarantee that he had completely dispelled the resentment. People's hearts were the most difficult to predict, so it couldn't be calculated. So I was not wrong. She took a few deep breaths, forced herself to calm down, and forced herself not to think too much. The most important thing now was that she had to get through this. She had to survive. Yes, survive. She couldn't help but smile bitterly. Who would have known that the great Empress Tensei had reached the moment of life and death? Ironically, the fatal threat didn't only come from the north. It came from the imperial capital, and it came from behind her. She had volunteered to come to Mingzhou. It wasn't out of her own will, but because she had already felt the meaningful gaze from the throne. Although the upheaval 2 years ago had been caused by her, without her father's permission and secret help, how could she have so perfectly deceived everyone and set up such a flawless killing trap? But that wasn't important. What was important was that the emperor would never make a mistake, and it was always the officials who were wrong. The current situation of assassins couldn't have been caused by the emperor. It could only have been caused by her, so she had to solve all of this. She had to settle this matter perfectly before the emperor lost his patience, even if it was just to appease and cover it up. Otherwise, she was very likely to lose her father's favor. For an ambitious imperial princess who was interested in the position of crown prince, there was nothing more terrible than disappointing her imperial father, even if she was now only a knife in her father's hand. After all, there was only one emperor, and the emperor was all alone. Before she truly became the crown prince, she was only a knife in the emperor's hand. It could be used to kill people, it could be cleaned and cherished diligently, and it could also be casually thrown aside. But a knife that was always on her body and very handy for killing people was much better than a knife that was left in the warehouse and could only be used a few times a year. She recalled her father's inadvertent cold gaze and couldn't help but shiver. She suddenly realized that her father's gaze made her feel a little scared. It wasn't the gaze of an heir, nor was it the gaze of a tool. That gaze wasn't indifferent or annoyed, but rather inexplicably affectionate and passionate, but it made her shiver. But at this time, she didn't have time to think about it. She had to solve this matter perfectly because she knew her father's temper. If that man's condition for reconciliation with the empire was Empress Tensei's head, then after the other party showed enough sincerity and guarantee, her father would definitely agree to this condition without hesitation. Moreover, it wasn't just her father and that man who wanted to kill her. Empress sneered. Perhaps her beloved brothers were also paying close attention to the situation in the north at this time. If they were stupid enough, they would definitely be planning an assassination. After all, if Empress Tensei died in Mingzhou, then the former marshal of the Heavenly Army would definitely be unable to defend himself. There would be no possibility of reconciliation with the imperial court, and the two sides would definitely fight. In this way, it would be equivalent to General Tensei and the former marshal dying together. The biggest competitor for the crown prince's position would be one less, and it would also create a perfect excuse for her father to start a war and characterize the troublesome person as a traitor of the empire. It was a perfect plan. The smile on Empress's face was full of mockery. My stupid brothers, if you succeed, then the situation will definitely be out of your expectations. No matter who wins or loses, he will find you and kill your entire family. Don't misunderstand, he definitely isn't doing this to avenge me. He will just be very angry because you have deprived him of the opportunity to take revenge. After all, the person who wants to kill me the most in this world is not you, but him. He must have wanted to take revenge on me. He must have wanted to kill me. He must have wanted to cut me into pieces piece by piece. He must have wanted to see me regret and despair. He must have wanted me to kneel at his feet and beg for mercy. He must have wanted me to taste the worst punishment in the world. He must have even dreamed of it, just like me. Just like me. She closed her eyes because hysterical madness was brewing in her eyes. It had been 2 years, and she had been living the same life. She had also been frantically searching for this man. She would never be able to sleep peacefully until she saw his corpse. She would never be able to sleep peacefully until she swallowed his flesh and blood into her stomach. Sun Lang. She tightly gripped the desk, her fingers leaving deep fingerprints on the chopping board. She fiercely roared that name in her heart. That was his real name. She was the first person to know his name. You're also my nightmare. You are also my inner demon. You monster. Why is there a monster like you? Something like you shouldn't exist in this world. I was the one who brought you into this world. I will personally correct my mistakes. No matter what, I will defeat you. I will kill you. I will eat you. Bite by bite, he ate, tore, chewed, swallowed, and digested the food. Now, I have come to find you. You must be very excited too. You must want to kill me too. But this time you can't do it. Just like I can't do it either. We are each other's nightmares. We are destined to kill each other until one of us is completely destroyed. So we still have a long time. I am also looking forward to this confrontation. Let's see how much you have improved in these 2 years. Let's see what you have learned in these 2 years. Let's see what new tricks you can play in these 2 years. Come. Chapter 5:24. Empress's body trembled. She didn't know whether it was out of fear, excitement, or anticipation. She viciously vented her emotions in her heart. She had been waiting for that person. She had been looking forward to this day for a very, very long time. Come on. She felt her blood slowly begin to boil. It was a long-awaited reunion, a long-awaited exchange of blows. She and Sun Lang were old enemies whose fates were intertwined with each other. They were the most intimate of enemies, and they were the most evenly matched of opponents. She knew that she would never be able to break free of her relationship with that man in this lifetime. It was this strange and treacherous relationship. She could only die at his hands, just like he could only die at his own hands. She had been waiting for him for a long time, longing to exchange blows with him again. It had also been a long time. The Emperor's concubine took a deep breath, calming her churning blood and suppressing her violently beating heart. She stood up and slowly moved her body. The battle between her and Sun Lang had already begun. She took out a map from the bookshelf beside her and slowly unfolded it. This was the layout of the camp. As early as a few hours ago, when the Vanguard Battalion had set up camp for the army, the accompanying military artist had drawn up a map of the camp and presented it to the main general. Through this map, she could control the entire situation. Defense, she said in her heart. It could only be defense. Given Sun Lang's temperament, before the Imperial envoy arrived in Mingzhou, he would certainly come and make a big fuss. Whether it was to display his strength, stall for time, or just play a prank, he would certainly take action and do something. This could be seen from his habits of using troops. Whether or not he had a plan to defeat the enemy, Sun Lang would never let his enemy easily achieve their goal. Thus, in the next few days, Sun Lang would certainly use all sorts of methods to sneak in and attack the camp. This was the crux of the problem. She couldn't stop him. No matter what, she couldn't stop him. The defeat 2 years ago had already proved a terrifying truth. Even if all the elites of Tensei province were to come out in full force, the result would still be inevitable. Sun Lang might not kill her now, but if he found out that she had brought a large number of elites from Tensei province with her, then the consequences would be unimaginable. He definitely wouldn't mind streamlining the troops of Tensei province's officials. No matter how many elites she brought with her, Sun Lang would kill them all. He was a madman who was extremely skilled in martial arts, was cunning, had no taboos, and had a burning desire to kill. He was simply the most difficult enemy to deal with. Therefore, she had already made preparations. This time, only a small portion of the Imperial envoy guards were direct descendants of Tensei province. The other troops were all transferred from the various elites of the 6 armies of Tianyuan. Their composition and origins were extremely complicated. It was like the intertwined roots of a tree. This army covered almost all the mountains of the Hodo army. Moreover, the commanders were all young elites of the new generation. These heroes had 2 advantages. First, almost no one knew Sun Lang. After all, that name was too distant for them, and it was rather taboo. Second, almost all of them had a father or relative of great importance or a superior who appreciated them. This was just like what was said in Vash's novel. When the protagonist was traveling the Jianghu, he killed a playboy because he wanted to fight for justice. There would certainly be other people's elders who would jump out to seek revenge. It was indeed not an easy task to find these wonderful troops and transfer them under her command. However, all the effort and hard work was worth it. This was a very clever move. Mr. Zhang, who had proposed this plan to her, was indeed a talented minister of the state. After all, those talented people with great prospects and connections in the court had extremely complicated origins. Some of their fathers and superiors did not see eye to eye with Sun Lang back then. If they were accidentally killed by Sun Lang this time, they would certainly become mortal enemies with Sun Lang, and her side would undoubtedly have one more powerful ally. Most importantly, the other group of young talents had fathers or superiors who were old friends of Sun Lang. Some of them had a very deep friendship with Sun Lang, and some of them could become potential allies of Sun Lang. Then, there was a problem. During the chaotic battle, these heroes would do their best to resist the enemy, but Sun Lang would kill whoever he saw. He would casually cut down the sons, nephews, or students of his former comrades. What happened at that time? It was too wonderful, too wonderful. A madman would not have allies. Sun Lang, you would also not have any allies. Everyone would become your enemy, because you had committed a serious crime against the country. Did you think you were wronged? Did you think that we were all evil? Yes, that's right. What you went through and bore was the greatest injustice in the world. We used you, we forced you, we were ungrateful, and we burned the bridge after crossing the river. You were the most wronged person in the world, and our actions were the worst in the world. I admit that, but so what? In this world, right and wrong were meaningless. For us, it was enough as long as this country could continue to exist, as long as this dynasty could continue to exist, as long as our rule could continue to exist, as long as we could continue to live in luxury and benefit our descendants. Nothing else mattered. So what if countless people suffered, despaired, and even died? This was a person. This was history. This was a country. You were able to play chess with us in Mingzhou today only because you were a little stronger than we imagined. That was all. This was just a fight to the death. That was all. The winner would be able to define everything. The winner would be the judge of justice. She held the military map in her hands and revealed a silent, cold smile. If it could be said that integrating these young heroes with extremely complicated backgrounds into the Imperial Envoy Guard was a clever move from a strategist, then this move was Empress Tensei's proudest work. She seemed to have thought of something interesting and began to laugh happily. You've been hiding very happily these 2 years, Sun Lang. I brought your confidants over. You must be very happy, right? Are you very nervous? Do you really want to run? But you can't run. It's just like your favorite open scheme. You know this is a trap, but you still obediently jump into it, because I understand you. No one understands you better than I do. 8 years. You've been in this world for 8 years. You've used 6 years to play the role of another person. There are some things that you can't break free from or let go of. For example, Lin Daiyu and Xue Baochai, who have been widows for you for 2 years. You should know in your heart who they love and wait for, right? For example, the Romba family. Looking at the letters you've written over the years, you've gradually begun to treat the Jia family as your home. I know that they are the last shackles you've broken free from, so they will become the best rope to tie you down. Of course, I understand you, so I let them lead the army over. I know, so I won't do anything to them. On the contrary, I have to send people to protect their safety. Because I understand you. If I tie them and everyone in the Jia family onto a prisoner carriage and push them in front of you in front of the 2 armies, I know very well what will happen at that time. I'm afraid that the first batch of people to die under your sword will be them. I understand you. You will not hesitate to kill them first. No one understands you better than I do. So, how can I force a madman to become a mad dog? How can I bear to let you become a mad dog? I want to completely defeat you in your most complete state. Otherwise, I'll die by your hands. There's no third path. There won't be a third path. This was her plan. Because she couldn't resist Sun Lang. She could only defend with all her strength. She had to create the conditions and opportunities to talk to him while defending. She had to find an opportunity to counterattack. She had to use the 2 trump cards, Lin Daiyu and Xue Baochai. As long as he was still human, he would always have weaknesses and misgivings. Then there would be opportunities to communicate. For such a fierce beast, she could only use the method of encircling and hunting him. She would continuously exhaust his strength, continuously reduce his range of movement, and continuously exhaust him. Exhaust him. As she was thinking, a report came from outside the tent. "Your Highness, Liu Kanjun is outside the tent asking for an audience." Empress Tensei frowned, but still said, "Okay." The tent door was opened. A graceful and elegant young man calmly walked in and bowed respectfully to her. "Your subject, Louis Wu, greets General Tensei." The emperor concubine had already sat down. She calmly looked at him with a meaningful gaze and directly said, "Mr. Zhang sent you to help me." The young man quickly glanced at the high and mighty empress concubine. A beautiful woman with the most noble status could always arouse the desire of every man to conquer her. No matter how beautiful a woman was, she was still a woman. Even if she became the empress, she still needed a man. He thought that he had concealed his desire very well and respectfully said, "I am indebted to elder brother for not abandoning me and recommending me. I am indebted to His Highness for giving me an important position." "Oh, share my worries?" Empress said calmly. "What worries do I have? What plans does Mr. have?" "Your Highness." The young man bowed again. He didn't get up and said slowly, "Your subject has been paying attention to the movements of Qinxiong Town and North Wind Camp for the past 2 days. The commanders of these two camps have been in close contact with each other recently. They often send their subordinates away and have secret discussions in their tents. I'm afraid there must be." A cold light flashed in Empress's eyes. She interrupted. "Generals Lin and Shui are old friends. They have a deep relationship with each other. They are like sisters. Women have some private things to talk about. But Liu Kanjun, you are spying on the commanders of these two camps. I'm afraid you can't be punished by the law." Liu Kanjun said calmly, "Your subject is a soldier. It's my duty to participate in the military." Empress sneered. "It's not your duty to spy on the generals, but it's the duty of every soldier to share your worries and fight for the country." Liu Kanjun stood up and said loudly, "Your Highness, why are you raising a tiger?" Empress Tensei's eyes turned cold. "How dare you? Your Highness, please punish me." Liu Kanjun knelt on the ground and said loudly, "Liu Yiwu's death is not to be regretted. But there's something I have to say. Your Highness, why don't you arrest Generals Lin and Shui and punish them?" "How dare you?" Empress's tone was as cold as ice. "A rotten scholar dares to talk about the country's affairs." Liu Yiwu laughed. "Your Highness, you're scared." There was a buzz and a cold light flashed. The long sword beside the emperor's concubine was unsheathed and brushed past Liu Yiwu's face. It tore through the carpet of the commander's tent and stabbed deeply into the ground. Her tone was cold as she said, "Mr. Zhang is full of wisdom. Why did he send you something like this? On his account, I will spare your life." Scram! Liu Yiwu didn't show any fear. He still maintained a smile on his face. "Brother Zhang's knowledge is 100 times better than mine. But even though I'm useless, I know one thing. Your Highness's enemies are happy to see those that your Highness is afraid of." Empress's expression changed, and her tone slowed down a bit. "What?" Liu Kanjun knelt straight and spoke clearly. His tone was gentle, and his words and actions were so calm that no one could tell that he had just walked past the gate of hell. He said, "If your Highness captures or even kills Generals Lin and Shui, you will definitely enrage the person in the north. The situation will be out of control. By then, the north of the empire will be corrupted, and the world will be shaken. Even your Highness will be in danger. This is what you're afraid of." He raised his head and stared at Empress. His tone became faster and more powerful. "Even if you escape back to the capital, it means that you've messed up His Majesty's order and brought the fiercest conflict to the table. If you die, you'll be a loyal official of the Empire and a filial daughter of His Majesty. Although you die, you won't dishonor His Majesty's order. But if you go back alive, you'll be a sinner who corrupted the current situation." He said word by word. "By then, not to mention the position of the crown prince, I'm afraid that what awaits you will be a cup of poisoned wine. This is what you're afraid of, isn't it, Empress? After a brief silence, Empress suddenly said, if you keep talking alarmist like your brother Zhang and can't come up with an effective plan, I'll cut you down immediately. Damn it. Louis Wu's lips slightly twitched. He did not dare to be pretentious anymore. His tone became respectful as he said calmly, as I said just now, since it's what your highness is afraid of, it's what your enemy will be happy to see. Empress was stunned for a moment. Then, her face darkened. You mean, yes. Louis Wu said slowly. Forgive me for being blunt, but your greatest enemy is not the one in the north, but the ones in the south. If I were one of those princes, I would definitely make plans, recruit men of sacrifice, and devise a plan to secretly murder Lin Shui and push the blame onto you. Empress's face slightly changed. She said casually, I've already expected this. I've arranged for smart and capable men to secretly protect them. Louis Wu shook his head. But there's no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days in this world. Then, what's your opinion? Your subject has 3 strategies. Louis Wu said calmly, the best plan is to simply go all the way. Since there's such a risk, why don't we take the initiative to attack? Your Highness, pick the prince who poses the greatest threat. After we kill Lin Shui and Lin Luoran, we'll push the blame to him. Empress shook her head. This plan is too hasty and dangerous. If we're not careful, everything will be over. No. Lu Kanjun smiled. Then, I'll tell you. The Empress concubine suddenly said, don't talk nonsense. That person in the north told me before that once a pretentious strategist tells you about the top, middle, and bottom 3 strategies, he definitely wants you to choose one. Damn it. Louis Wu was shocked. Only now did he realize that he was indeed rash. But under Empress's gaze, he still said, now that things have come to this, why don't we exaggerate the crisis and make it clear that it's dangerous? Let's join hands with the person in the north for now. Empress's expression became meaningful. The air suddenly became quiet. After a long time, when she was about to speak, her expression suddenly changed. She listened carefully. What's that sound? Chapter 525. Empress was just about to speak when her expression suddenly changed. She listened carefully. What's that sound? Louis Wu immediately stood up and assumed the posture of a loyal protector. However, nothing happened even after he was on alert for a while. Damn it. Don't tell me this is another method this woman is using to dampen my spirit. He snuck a glance at the Empress concubine and saw that this noble Empress's face was as if she was facing a great enemy. She was on guard against any possible movement. That serious look made people who didn't know her think that she was facing a life and death battle. But nothing happened at all. He hesitated for a moment and said, Your Highness, it's okay. If the person in the north wanted to harm you, he would have done it long ago. The Empress concubine remained silent and continued to look around with a serious expression. Damn it, say something. Louis Wu waited for a while and tried to persuade her again. From what I can see, our camp is well arranged. Your Highness has also gathered the world's elites to guard it. It can be said that you have tens of thousands of armor and over 100 good generals. Although the person in the north has outstanding military achievements and is almost a legend, he is still made of flesh and blood. Can he drive straight in by himself? Empress's eyes twitched slightly. Lu Kanjun was still analyzing the situation honestly. Your Highness, don't worry. Even if he has the ability, why would he wait until now? I have analyzed the situation in Mingzhou for the past few days. Although that person is causing trouble in the north, he hasn't taken the step of raising the flag of rebellion. From this, it can be seen that his goal should be to force the north to force the imperial court. His ultimate goal is to discuss it at the table. As long as he still wants to discuss it, he won't go too far. When he said this, he had already habitually revealed a wise smile and confidently said, So, Your Highness, you don't have to worry. That person back then was known for his meticulous planning. Even if he wants to show off his power to us, he will definitely have a sense of propriety. This trip will definitely be frightening but not dangerous, so, Empress Tensei, finally couldn't take it anymore. She said coldly, "Shut the F***ck up." She cursed. She actually cursed. She actually cursed at me. And why? Am I wrong? How did I offend you this time? Now, Louis Wu really felt that this woman had the qualifications to be an emperor. After all, he had already experienced in advance what it meant to be in the company of a ruler was like living with a tiger. Damn it, this was no longer temperamental. She was simply mentally ill and mentally deranged. But I heard that she had an ambiguous relationship with that person back then. Looking at her flustered appearance now, it was indeed a little interesting. He cursed silently in his heart, but his boss had already told him to shut up. What else could he do? He was also in despair. The pitiful Liu Kanjun could only stand awkwardly on the spot, lowering his head in silence. After a while, Empress said coldly, "Tell me, what do you think the other party would do if they wanted to intimidate us?" You want me to talk again? Louis Wu was extremely displeased, but this was the sorrow of being an underling. He could only pretend that nothing had happened and analyzed seriously. First of all, that person may be in charge of Mingzhou in name, but even he can't order the Mingzhou army to make things difficult for the imperial court. Therefore, the number of people he can mobilize is definitely not many. Secondly, he also has to take into account the imperial court's reputation and won't kill too many people. Moreover, he is a famous general of his generation and one of the few peerless masters in the world. A great grandmaster like him will respect his status and won't do anything too despicable. Therefore, I believe that the other party will mainly use harassment, arson, poison, sneak attacks, and plot to create fear and chaos to break the army's morale and slow down the marching speed. He cupped his hands and said, "Therefore, this trip will be daunting but not dangerous. You only need to be aware that you will be wronged. In fact, the other party's methods are just these. Although it is indeed a headache, it is just a small problem that won't affect the big picture. As long as your highness is in the middle and commands well, we will be able to deal with whatever comes our way and make the other party unable to do anything," Empress said coldly. "If you can think of these things, how can he not think of them? Since you know that the backbone of the camp is me, and I didn't bring any trusted generals with me. That is to say, other than me, there is no one else in the entire camp who has enough prestige and ability to command these proud soldiers from the 6 armies. Then, at this point, Empress's expression suddenly froze. Louis Wu did not hear the rest of the sentence. He curiously raised his head and saw Empress's expression suddenly change. Then, he heard a shout that was filled with shock and anger. "Damn it!" In an instant, a loud laugh came from the top of the tent. With the sound of ripping silk, the thick and tough tent directly split open and a black figure descended from the sky. The intruder was so fast that Louis Wu didn't even have time to react before his vision turned black. First, he was punched twice in the face, then he was hit in the stomach with a knee, followed by a heavy kick to his buttocks. He was in so much pain that he was sent flying with a wild goose landing on the sand. He rolled twice on the ground and lost consciousness. That person laughed wildly. "Yo, where did this little girl come from? Give me a smile." The Emperor's concubine could no longer laugh. She stared at the person in front of her. Although he was wearing funny night clothes and had his face covered, exuding an extremely wretched aura of a rapist, she would not be mistaken. Even if this person turned into ashes, she would still recognize him. She just did not expect that the scene of their reunion after 2 years would be like this. But he had come. He had finally come. Her body was trembling in excitement, and she felt her blood boiling. You came. You came. You came. You came. You came. Kill you. Kill you. Kill you. Kill you. Kill you. Kill you. A monster in troubled times, a great traitor, a foreign race from the outer regions, a sinner of the empire. I have been waiting for you for a long time. You have finally come. She pulled out another long sword from the sword rack, and the blade shone with a brilliant light. The weapon in her hand gave her a sense of security, but it seemed that the other party did not care. Indeed, whether she had a weapon or not made no difference to the other party. He seemed to be very happy, feeling that this situation of a cat playing with a mouse was very interesting. He said with a smile, "Are you surprised?" Are you pleasantly surprised? Empress did not speak, but she sneered in her heart. Sure enough, you're still the same. Just as I expected. Do you feel that victory is in your hands, that you enjoy the feeling of teasing the enemy? Who do you think I am? Do you think I did not prepare for this? She looked at the enemy in front of her and said in a sharp voice, Where are the two generals Lin and Shui? You want to threaten me? You want to intimidate me? You want to hold me hostage? You want to negotiate with me? You want to settle old debts with me? Good. Do you dare to stay? Do you dare to see them? Sun Lang on the other side was instinctively shocked, like a deer that heard a strange sound, and he subconsciously looked around. Empress gave a cold laugh through gritted teeth and said in a sharp voice, What? Are you afraid? The two of them will be here soon. Are you not going to run? Are you afraid? Aren't you very strong? Don't you have the ability to attack camps? You have the ability to come and go as you please here, but every time you have to run. Sun Lang said in a harsh voice, Don't think you have one. Emperor Concubine laughed loudly and said, Just use whatever moves you have. Sun Lang clenched his fists and roared unyieldingly, You force me. Empress suddenly felt an extreme danger. She subconsciously pulled back her sword to protect herself and took a step back. Sun Lang in front of her assumed a strange posture, like the legendary Saint Seiya standing on the ground and calling for the resonance of his natal constellation. He raised both of his hands and constantly drew strange trajectories in the air. His eyes were serious, and his mind was one. He followed the traditional ritual, and before he attacked, he shouted the name of the move. Under the starry sky, in the army, there was a hot-blooded and shocking roar. It was the echo of justice. It was called who? Jia. 10. 8. Touch. Her hands were like thousands of shadows, layer upon layer, without a trace of smoke or fire. It was like a small river in Jiangnan. The Lotus Maiden's bare hands swept across the surface of the river and pulled up a lotus. Before the Empress Concubine could summon her emperor weapon, she felt her hand go empty and her sword was snatched away. Then, his entire body was boiling, as if he had been swept into blazing lava. Although the fire did not burn his body, it was burning his soul. This is the power of a substitute envoy. His soul was trembling. That sweet and painful feeling was just like. However, Empress was indeed a hero of the age. Taking advantage of the last bit of clarity, she bit the tip of her tongue and forcefully summoned the Imperial Army while she was in great pain. A bright light surged out of her body, resisting Sun Lang's mysterious power. A heavy golden saber fell into Empress's hand. With a flash of the saber, Sun Lang retreated. Tian Yuan, your father actually gave this saber to you. Sun Lang shook off the water stains on his fingertips. He looked at Empress with a bit of pleasure and pity in his eyes. Your body, humph, that thing is actually true. With the tip of the saber on the ground, Empress's legs kept trembling. She forced herself to support her body and stared at Sun Lang fiercely. The woman had no time to pay attention to Sun Lang's implication. She felt extremely humiliated and ashamed. No matter what, she was still a woman. Before she could say anything, Sun Lang turned around and ran. Goodbye. By the way, I'm going to attack the camp. You should quickly take command of the army. Empress was startled at first. Then she flew into a rage. She had already realized Sun Lang's purpose. She looked at her hands. Her white skin was now covered with bright red. The terrifying pleasure was still surging out from the depths of her body. He could imagine her face, her skin, her condition, her appearance, what she looked like at this moment. It was like, how could she meet people in this state? There was an anxious shout from outside. Your Highness! Your Highness! Is Her Highness okay? Empress subconsciously shouted. Trespassers will be killed. Then there was the sound of tables being smashed. Sun Lang stood at the top of a tent, hidden in the darkness. He heard the angry voice from the Central Army's tent, and also heard the shouts of people and the neighs of horses not far away. In the waning light, there were two familiar figures spurring their horses. One of them held a snake spear, and the other held a sky halberd. They led the soldiers of the headquarters to charge here. Long time no see, and sorry. I'm going to cause trouble. He raised his hand and shot a signal flare. The flame was blazing and rushed into the sky. Chapter 5:26. Military law was as firm as a mountain. Among the laws and regulations of different levels of organization that were derived from the human civilization, military law was always the strictest part. As the strongest country in the world, the Hutu Empire had developed the art of war and the situation of war in the cold weapon era to the peak after decades of baptism in the Tianyuan War. The most prominent point was the extremely complicated and perfect rules and order, and that was the significance of military law. The significance of military law was to obliterate individuality, to polish stubborn stones, and to mold all the soldiers into perfect parts and assemble them into extremely destructive war machines, to make the soldiers give up thinking, to teach the soldiers to obey orders, to boost morale, and to nurture the soul of the army. All military law should serve this purpose. Therefore, when Sun Lang fired the signal flare, most of the soldiers had already reacted. Although they did not know what was going on, there were strict military regulations. However, the military already had very strict security regulations. When such a signal of unknown origin was discovered, there was only one way to deal with it: kill without mercy. Almost at the same time as the signal flare rose, two sharp whistling sounds pierced through the air. One of the arrows pierced through the fireball, while the other shot towards Sun Lang. The two arrows were both fast and accurate. In almost an instant, they had determined the position and shot two arrows. With such accuracy and strength, they could be called a divine archer. There were already faint cheers. General Shui's divine archery. This General Shui was a female hero of the Tianyuan era, the leader of the Golden Arrow Squad, and the commanding general of the North Wind Battalion. She carried two bows at her waist and used a sky piercer. She was famous for her archery and halberd skills. She was his cousin, his ex-girlfriend, and his old lover. If it had been someone else who shot the two arrows with Sun Lang's temper, even if he did not catch the arrows and throw them back to nailing the shooter to the ground, he would have retaliated with a can of herring. But since it was Cousin Shui who shot the two arrows, he seemed to have no other choice but to follow his heart. Well, there seemed to be another choice. Sun Lang grabbed the arrow that was shooting towards him and threw it with the back of his hand. It was as fast as lightning, bringing with it a series of sharp sounds as it pierced through the air. It flew towards the direction where the cheers of General Shui's divine archery had come from. What the F***? Does my cousin need you to suck up to her? After he threw the arrow, he heard a faint cry of pain coming from the other side. He smiled complacently, but then he had another thought. Hey, wait a minute. With her personality, after knowing that her arrow was caught and thrown back, she would definitely feel guilty. This was really inappropriate. Just at this moment, another dozen or so arrows were shot at him. Sun Lang hugged the arrows with both hands and caught them without missing a single one. With another, heavenly maiden scattering flowers, a series of soft whooshing sounds were heard as another wave of arrows was shot in the direction of General Shui's divine archery. Good. As long as there are more injured people, you won't know who is your fault. I'll make things bigger. By then, you'll be so busy that you won't have the mood to think about this small matter. Sun Lang clapped his hands, thinking that he had succeeded in his scheme, but he quickly reacted. F*** your mother. What kind of boring thing am I doing? He glanced at Cousin Shui, who was knocking an arrow, and then saw Cousin Lin, who was wearing heavy armor and riding a snow-treading ebony horse, carrying a snake spear and leading her heavy cavalry in a murderous charge. He couldn't help but shiver. He turned and jumped out of the tent, charging out in a certain direction. He bumped head-on into several soldiers who were rushing out of their tents. He punched and kicked them, and they all fell to the ground. This moment of chaos exposed his tracks. He heard someone shout from his side, "The thief is here." The strict military discipline of Hutu came into effect. Without the command of the general, the soldiers had consciously formed combat units. Under the command of the highest military commander of the group, they moved toward the direction of the chaos and surrounded it. They also merged with other combat units that they encountered. Such strict military regulations ensured that even in the most chaotic and worst situation, the soldiers at the lowest level could still constantly form a combat force to defend and even counterattack. It was a very perfect arrangement and system. It was enough to deal with most of the attacks and accidents. Unfortunately, their enemy this time not only knew the military system of Hoodoo like the back of his hand, but also directly participated in the improvement and reorganization of the military discipline and regulations of the Hoodoo army. He is even the one responsible for signing and stamping. Sun Lang was observant and alert, always able to break out from the weakest part of the encirclement, always able to disperse the large combat units that had been gathered with great difficulty. He charged left and right in the camp, hitting whoever he saw. These officers and soldiers who had no command and could only fight according to military regulations were beaten until they were dizzy and unable to distinguish between east and west. This was also the most fatal weakness of this military camp. Except for Empress, no one had the prestige and ability to dispatch and command the entire army. Empress didn't bring her trusted generals. She knew very well that Sun Lang definitely wouldn't mind killing a few more generals, and she didn't trust anyone else. In other words, Empress was the core of the order of the entire camp. As long as she couldn't complete the command work and take charge of the overall situation, then this camp with a large number of elites gathered would be a sheet of loose sand. Sun Lang showed a smug smile. Yes, this was the reason why he used the 18 touches of the Hujian Empress. On the premise that he didn't kill her, he made her lose control and command of the army. Then, it would be convenient for him to cause trouble. This was a tactic. He had already broken through a group of tents and turned to another camp path. Suddenly, flames rose up in front of him. A majestic young general in a white robe, clad in bright silver armor, charged out from the side and shouted, "Surrender!" Sun Lang glanced at Zhu Qiuan's armor, then looked at the attire of the henchmen behind him. He already understood most of what was going on. He suddenly shouted, "Zhu Qiuan is a son of a bitch." The young general who rushed over was immediately enraged. The henchmen behind him all revealed murderous looks. The young general in white robe was even more murderous. It was as if Sun Lang had chopped up his father. He roared, "Impudent!" But as soon as his voice fell, Sun Lang rushed over like a whirlwind. After grabbing a steel spear, he swung it like a feather duster. First, he sent all the henchmen flying. Then he kicked the young general to the ground. After throwing away the feather duster, he raised his tortoiseshell fist and violently beat the white-robed young general until he vomited blood again and again. Then, he threw the white-robed young general out. It was simply brutal to the extreme. After he was done, he clapped his hands and said proudly, "This is the result of being a traitor's lackey." The remaining soldiers shouted and hurriedly went to save the fallen young general. Sun Lang's face was full of vigor. He snorted twice and ran away. Not long after, he ran into another group of people blocking his way. The leader of the group held a pair of hammers in his hands and roared angrily, "Report your name. This general is Qian Yuanshuang. Why don't you?" Sun Lang glanced at him and shouted, "Li Yuanfeng sold out to bring peace to the world." The other party was stunned and subconsciously said, "Lu Jinyue's father and mother died." You are." A gust of wind blew in his face. Before he could come back to his senses, the man in black opposite him had already pounced over. He raised his hammers and wanted to hit, but the other party's attacks were like ghosts. He only saw a shadow flash, and his face was slapped twice. Then he was kicked in the stomach. Surprisingly, it didn't hurt. His body floated and flew out like he was riding on clouds. He smashed into a tent, and his head sank. He fainted on the spot. Sun Lang snorted, "Stupid nephew, you even dare to hit your uncle. You're going against the heavens." He knocked down the other henchman blocking his way and began his escape from the temple. However, he was gentle, which was a stark contrast to the treatment of the group of children in front of him. Along the way, he knocked down a few more young talents. Sun Lang had already come back to his senses. The stories in the novels were all like this. After casually chopping down a little bastard who was looking for trouble, an old bastard would jump out to take revenge on you. TSK, this heartless woman. She wanted me to become enemies with the important officials in the imperial court. However, this was not a problem for Sun Lang at all. Although he didn't know any of these people, it wasn't difficult to identify their origins. The soldiers' armor, battle formation style, weapons and martial arts patterns, and even their accents. These soldiers came from all over the world and had a strong personal style. These things were too conspicuous for the military chief of the Martial Arts Hall and Sword Pavilion, who had once commanded all the soldiers in the world. Along the way, he used all kinds of magical speech and communication methods to determine whether they were friends or foes. Then, he beat them up without any explanation. However, the severity of the beating was different. Some woke up and were fine. Some had to recuperate for a few months. However, no one died, and no one was left with any hidden injuries. If they returned to the Imperial Court in the future, they would have something to say. F***CK your mother, what happened? What? I beat up your son? F***CK, it's not a big deal. I beat him up because I think highly of him. You should be happy. Think about it. Who would have the honor of being beaten by me? In the future, it would be a very honorable thing to brag about in the brothel. The perfect response, the perfect system, and the perfect seniority. He rampaged all the way in the camp. When an individual's martial strength was enough to take a leisurely stroll amidst the constant pursuit and interception, the tents and arrangements in the camp would become a stumbling block for his own army. Under the lack of a unified command, more and more military forces were led by the nose by Sun Lang. This caused an obvious tilt in the defense forces. There were areas that were focused on, and there were areas that were weak. Seeing that the camp wall was not far away and hearing the thunderous battle cries behind him, Sun Lang revealed a proud smile and waved his hand to shoot out the second signal flare. The signal flare just now meant to get into position. This signal flare meant to get ready to start. First, it was an air raid. An original and terrifying air raid was also a senior's ardent expectation and experience for these military juniors. He wanted to use this air raid to let these elites from all over the Empire understand the importance of air supremacy forever. In the sky, the Death Messenger dragged something huge and swooped down from the clouds. Justice that would not be absent, nor would it be late. Chapter 5:27. Courier was very sad, as a former Flame Guardian, as the most evil woman in the legendary Nine-Dragon Fort. The legendary St. Yuri Castle. As the pilot of the Death Messenger, she was at the top of the Blazing Angels combat order, bringing terror to countless enemies, and was seen as the future star of the order. And now, she was doing such a thing. In fact, at this moment, if there was a 500-kilogram fuel-air explosive hanging on the suspension module of the Blazing Angel, she would definitely be much happier than she was now. After all, she was born in a race that was filled with violence and alcohol in their bones. They took pleasure in killing, destroying, plundering, and spreading fear. Piloting the Blazing Angel to descend heavenly fire, burning the bodies of her enemies, making them scream, and using their despair and death as dishes to go with alcohol was indeed a pleasure in the world. But now, fine, she was also spreading fear, but it was a different kind of fear. She carefully controlled the Blazing Angel, hiding the huge biochemical weapon in the clouds. Although the 500-kilogram weight was far from a theoretical limit of the Blazing Angel, it still uncontrollably affected the flight performance of the combat equipment. For the Blazing Angel, who was known for being as swift as lightning, this feeling was very uncomfortable. After all, the Blazing Angel was not designed to be used for bombing. At least, the Death Angel was not. She was waiting for Sun Lang's signal in boredom. And then she could not help but remember a weapon research that the divine right nation of flames had once abolished. It was almost 100 years ago. At that time, after the efforts of generations of flame priests, the Order of Flames finally succeeded in giving the Blazing Angel the ability to completely rule the sky. Metal materials that were light and sturdy enough, jet engines with powerful propulsion, and a design that was completely suitable for high-speed flight. The Order of Flames had invested all the technological advancements the Divine Right Nation had accumulated so far, using the mysterious flame runic ritual to the extreme, and even swallowing their humiliation and trading with the Nation of Metal in exchange for their more advanced metal forging technology. Finally, the unique Blazing Angel was created. Powerful, fast, nimble, and terrifying, it would become the worst nightmare of all enemies. The Order of Flames was overjoyed that the Blazing Angel had finally turned from the King of Land to the King of the Sky and the Land. It was at this moment that a flame priest with a very wild imagination suddenly said, why don't we combine this light and sturdy material, powerful jet engines, perfect design with the powerful firepower of the Nation of Fire to create a new war machine that is different from the Blazing Angel and has an unparalleled advantage in a certain field. Everyone was silent for a moment and felt that it made sense. After countless careful consideration, a secret plan codenamed Crimson Dragon's Roar was finally put into action. The Flame Priest had taken the appearance of a bird as reference and decided on the appearance of this new aerial war machine. Compared to the Blazing Angel that could change its form and had powerful functions, the Blazing Angel only had a single appearance, relatively weak armor, and even less ammunition capacity. However, this thing did not require too many precise flame enchantments, which meant that it could be mass-produced. Moreover, the requirements for the pilot were much lower than the Flame Guards. Sometimes there was not even one person in a million who could pilot a Blazing Angel. It was much easier to find a pilot for this war machine. Moreover, compared to the Blazing Angel, they had unbelievable speed and group strength. After investing a lot of manpower and resources, many excellent researchers racked their brains, and countless modifications and reconstructions, the Order of Flames finally obtained their first-generation war machine. Everyone's efforts were not in vain. In the drill, the war machine achieved terrifying results that were far beyond imagination, to the point that the priests present were crying tears of joy. They believed that their country had opened a new form of warfare, and that they were unquestionably at the forefront of the world. Everyone was immersed in the beautiful future where the great theocracy would conquer the earth with its feet and the metal with its fists and dominate the world. Then, the Russians would naturally become arrogant. Before international order was established, everyone liked to show off their fists when they had nothing to do, not to mention that there was a breakthrough here. Therefore, the priests decided to show off and scare their neighbors. Naturally, the gaze of St. Yuri Castle fell upon their eastern neighbor to the southeast, but the idea was quickly rejected. If there was anyone in the world who was unpredictable, it would be the Eastern Imperial Army fighters. You could never imagine what those monsters could do with a seemingly primitive cold weapon. To put it simply, they were afraid that their new war machine would be shot down by an Imperial fighter wielding an Imperial Army war bow. If that happened, it would be too humiliating. Therefore, their eyes turned to an even softer persimmon, the Greenwood Nation to the south. They were a bunch of dumb, backward idiots, a bunch of primitive people who still maintain a tribal system. They were retards who had beasts as companions, and yet they occupied immeasurably fertile land. *CK them. At that time, the Sky Demon had not yet arrived, and the international situation was still rather tense. Several major countries did not see eye to eye with each other, and small conflicts were common. Coincidentally, there was a border conflict with the Greenwood Nation at that time. Without saying anything, St. Yuri Castle sent a high-speed airstrike formation consisting of 16 war machines to the skies of the Greenwood Nation. They wanted to let the war creatures know who was the real overlord of the skies. That's right, the Greenwood Nation had the world's earliest organized air force. The aerial forces led by the Dragonborn and Eaglemen were born with the ability to fly. But now, the wingless humans rushed into the skies with their intelligence. The flamethrower flying faster and higher, and with an overwhelming long-range firepower advantage, tore the Greenwood Nation's traditional air combat formation into pieces in the very first encounter. It achieved a hearty victory in the traditional air combat of the Greenwood Nation, opening a new chapter in human aviation history. It should have been like this. But the Greenwood Nation was still the Greenwood Nation. They deserved to be ranked third in the world. The commander of the Greenwood Nation's Air Force, who had been beaten to a pulp that day, thought about it for an entire night. He did not know where he got the inspiration from, but the next day, he came up with a countermeasure. With a single order, his subordinates went to the nearby major tribes and cities to carry out an emergency conscription. Thus, when the flamethrower flying formation once again appeared in the Greenwood Nation's airspace, a terrifying counterattack followed. With a single order from the Greenwood Nation's commander, hundreds of thousands of blade swallows soared into the air and spread out under the guidance of the flutes of the Skywalker shepherds. They set up an inescapable net at a speed of more than 300 kilometers per hour. After a series of encirclement and interception, they knocked down all the flamethrower flying formations at shocking rate. Therefore, the Greenwood Nation only used some blade swallows that could be easily caught in the woods to completely destroy the flamethrower flying formation that the flamethrower had invested a fortune in. After this setback, St. Uri Castle was furious. The flamethrower priest who proposed the formation of a flying formation was naturally thrown into the court. All related projects were suspended, and all blueprints were locked in the database to collect dust. Due to this unprecedented humiliation and fiasco, aircraft became a word that could not be mentioned by the church. Anyone who mentioned it would be considered politically incorrect, a reversal of history, or a spy plotting to overthrow the country. Under these circumstances, no one in the church dared to mention aircraft again. Not at all. By the way, this disastrous failure also had a profound impact on the growth of the flamethrower's technology tree. It directly led to the complete defeat of the mobile vehicle faction within the church and the bankruptcy of the air and ground integrated army theory. The seemingly promising Air Force research was completely canceled, and the power armor faction took the opportunity to counterattack. Taking advantage of this unprecedented situation, the Seraph Battle Order completely established the absolute dominance of the flamethrower army. Since then, Flamethrower began to fully research and popularize and improve power armor. And this incident was so toxic that it became the laughingstock of international public opinion and a negative example that reminded all countries. As a result, whenever a fool in a country wanted to get a high-speed aircraft, there would be people around him reminding him not to be stupid. Just think about the big idiots in Flamethrower. This incident had been over 100 years, but the impact was still far-reaching. So much so that the research on conventional aircraft in all countries was almost in a quagmire. Only a small number of high-precision air forces were maintained, such as the Seraph of Flamethrower and the warriors of the Imperial Army who had the ability to fly. Conventional high-speed aircraft would be easily defeated by the Greenwood Nation, but the Air Force of the Greenwood Nation would be easily defeated by the Seraph. Therefore, the Church only needed to maintain the top Air Force and not develop conventional air forces. When it came to air combat, the world maintained this strange balance and abnormal development. As a flamethrower, Courier was naturally qualified to know about this serious political mistake and lesson. But today, when she dragged a 500-kilogram biochemical weapon and flew over the Hoodoo army camp, she suddenly missed the air knights who had their wings broken before their glory. Such a scene suddenly appeared in her mind. More than a dozen iron birds with a large number of biochemical weapons shot out brilliant rings of fire in the night sky, broke through the thick clouds, and rushed to the unprepared enemy camp like eagles about to hunt. The death messengers escorted them and blocked all threats, such as the flying birds and the arrows of the Imperial Army from below. Then the iron birds arrived above the target and poured down all the biochemical bombs. Countless terrible substances from hell fell from the sky, as if it was the end of the world, causing the enemy to fall into fear, panic, and even madness. Before they could counterattack, the Air Knights had calmly retreated. Wait, there seems to be something wrong. Why do these aircraft have to be hung with such terrible things? Isn't it better to carry conventional explosive ammunition? Creel suddenly realized that under the influence of Sun Lang, his thoughts seemed to have undergone a certain degree of change. It was really frightening to think about. But she vaguely felt that perhaps the air combat aircraft that had been sealed by the church for a long time seemed to be probably, maybe not so useless perhaps over the years. Many people in the church also thought so. It was just that no one dared to say it out loud. After all, in a place like the Kingdom of Fire, scientific research and politics were never separated. Just mentioning some things again was sometimes risky, and sometimes it was wrong. But if it was Sun Lang, she thought Sun Lang magically reached some consensus with the Kingdom of Fire a few days ago. She didn't know what method he used, but he extorted a lot of things from the Emperor God. Perhaps if he spoke, the materials and drawings that were regarded as shameful and wrong by the church, or the failed products sealed in the depths of the arsenal, might be easily obtained perhaps. Under special circumstances, these failed works would be able to shine again. Should I mention it to Sun Lang? She was a little hesitant. After all, the church was once bitten, twice shy. Plus, the power armor faction still had the right to speak. Every few days, they would bring up this incident to reflect on the lessons of history and suppress the competing factions. Therefore, the church's internal view of the disastrous failure was to the point of madness. Even a flame guardian like Courier was brainwashed. She instinctively felt that the aircraft was unreliable, and there seemed to be a major hidden danger that she didn't realize. And she didn't know much about this matter. If she confidently recommended it to Sun Lang, and Sun Lang asked for it with interest from Kingdom of Fire, the result would be the same as the time more than 100 years ago. She would be defeated in an instant. Then, just as she hesitated, a green flame soared into the sky, shining brightly. Courier's heart skipped a beat. She didn't have time to think about this. The jet engine was activated, and the Seraph broke through the clouds and dived down, bringing with it a ghost-like howl. She made a simple estimation and aimed at the bombing location that she and Sun Lang had agreed on. She released the control lock of the suspension module, and the huge wooden barrel that was tightly sealed fell with a whistling sound. The battle-hardened elites quickly discovered the strange object that was falling from the sky. Immediately, colorful lights flashed in the camp. Although the soldiers of the Empire didn't know what an air raid was, they still had a defense protocol to deal with this kind of attack from the sky. This tradition had been around for a long time. After all, humans had long mastered the mystery of the catapult. When huge rocks were thrown by ingenious machines, they could neither dodge nor wait for death. There had to be a way to deal with it. But sadly, their opponent was the one who knew them best. Not only did he understand the military system of the Empire, but he also understood the advanced tactics from another world. For example, there was a bombing method called air blast. There was a boom. Courier visually estimated that the huge biochemical liquid bomb had already reached the sky above the detonation point, so she immediately used the manual detonation method. She drew the flame cannon from her right arm and fired 3 shots. Then, the lift of the propulsion engine reached the maximum, and she turned around and rushed toward the sky at the fastest speed. It was said that when the B-29 bomber planted mushrooms in Japan in 1945, the pilot had to quickly raise the nose of the plane the moment he dropped the bomb to avoid being caught in a nuclear explosion. The blazing flames whizzed over and smashed the outer wooden shell as easily as breaking through dry weeds and rotten wood. This special liquid bomb had 2 layers. The outer layer was filled with explosives. Boom! It was as if thunder had exploded in the sky. The scorching fireball instantly burned and illuminated everything. It was as if a small sun had risen in the night sky. Then, the sun seemed to have turned green. It was as if the Burning Legion had arrived. The delicacies of the civilians in Ming Province had become popular in the past few months. In this passionate explosion, they sent beautiful blessings and welcome to these guests from all over the world, to these loyal soldiers of the Empire. They showed them the uncanny workmanship of the microorganisms. Just as Mr. Lu Sun said, the military camp was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. Time stopped for a moment. Then, the world went crazy. Deafening curses and screams continued to sound, and the sound of vomiting rose and fell. It had to be said that this round of ingenious biochemical attacks had achieved incredible results. This operation was simply suffocating. In this chaos, no one noticed that in a corner of the military camp, 25 Slalormen were fully armed and wearing simple gas masks. They were all dumbfounded. They had watched this performance from the beginning to the end. Whether it was Sun Lang breaking out from the heavily guarded camp and leading the army by the nose with terrifying force, it was still that earth-shattering liquid bomb. Looking at the chaotic scene in the camp, looking at the screams and vomiting of the soldiers of the Empire, they were shocked. An inexplicable emotion grew in their hearts. Not long ago, in that damn prison, they experienced the same thing. A few small iron cans flew in, followed by a few gunshots. Then, the prison became hell. Now, these people of the Empire suffered the same blow. Looking at their embarrassed appearance, looking at their comical appearance, looking at their ridiculous appearance. What a good feeling. You can play like this? They were all ruthless felons. Almost all of them had multiple lives in their hands. Killing, plundering, and destroying could bring them pleasure. However, there were always people in this world that they couldn't deal with. Otherwise, they wouldn't have become prisoners of the church and been sold to the people of the Empire. In a head-on confrontation, they couldn't deal with the army of the Hood of Empire at all. But just this could make them so weak and ridiculous. They were all in great shock and couldn't speak for a while. They could only silently enjoy this performance. It was simply too exciting. But soon, they found something even more exciting. I'll say, one of the prisoners stammered that the others were a little confused. A person beside him said fiercely, "What's wrong?" The prisoner pointed to the front weakly. "Listen to this sound." Everyone looked in that direction at the same time. It seemed that it was indeed a little. Suddenly, someone shouted, "He led those soldiers of the Empire over." Although the scope of the air explosion was large, it didn't cover the whole camp. Only a part of it was affected. In fact, this could spread more chaos. But this wasn't the point. The point was that Sun Lang, who was running around with a group of murderous soldiers of the Empire, had led those elite and powerful guys over here. When these burly men were scared out of their wits, Sun Lang also saw them. He even had the face to laugh, pointed to the side and shouted, "Those are all my companions." F***CK. Although the Russians didn't understand Chinese, they were all bad guys, so they could read the meaning of that sentence from Sun Lang's expression and the reaction of those soldiers of the Empire. Many of them cursed and wanted to turn around and run away. At this time, Sun Lang shouted, "Don't move." This shout contained inner strength. When it entered their ears, it shook their hearts and souls. Because of this shout and the deterrence Sun Lang had established before, everyone was stunned for a moment. Some people subconsciously stopped in their tracks, but there were still 4 people who gritted their teeth and ran without caring about anything else. The sword energy broke through the air, whistling. In an instant, the heads of those who ran away flew up. The headless corpses ran a few steps and fell to the ground. Their bodies were still twitching, and blood spurted out from their necks. Sun Lang laughed wildly. "It hasn't even been a day. Have you forgotten what I said? You're all my dogs. Dogs don't listen, so what's the point of keeping them?" His figure moved, and his speed suddenly increased tenfold. He jumped to the side of these Russians with a crazy smile in his eyes. He laughed loudly. "It's like I said. As long as you listen to my orders, no one will die. Those who don't listen will die. But in return, I can guarantee that as long as you obey me, you can live. Because I have the final say in your life and death." The Russians' faces were filled with fear and anger. They couldn't imagine that there was such a temperamental madman in the world. What did he want to do? Sun Lang soon told them the answer. He pointed to the pursuers behind him and laughed heartily. "Rejoice, scum. You will receive the honor that most people in the world can't obtain. You will receive the most exciting experience in the world. One rider against 1,000, sweeping away 1,000 soldiers. How carefree, how surging. Now, follow me and charge back. We'll crush these pursuers and turn around to break out of the encirclement. We'll pierce through this camp and kill our way out. I'll give you 5 seconds to think about it. Either follow me and charge out, or stay where you are and be chopped into minced meat. 1. I'm kidding. 5. Sun Lang let out a long laugh. He turned around and punched out. The wind from his fist surged, creating a violent shockwave. The astral wind blew, knocking the 10 or so soldiers who were rushing over to him to the ground. Without saying anything, he turned around and rushed back. The Russians were still in shock. Sheffield, who had just been given a name by Sun Lang, had already followed silently. There were a few others who moved with him. The rest of the people also reacted. They gritted their teeth and quickly followed. If they stayed where they were, they would definitely be chopped into minced meat by the furious soldiers. Anyway, there was no worse possibility. That damned lunatic, Hutu Empire's monster, temperamental demon. Sun Lang broke up a small group of soldiers and laughed. Sheffield, you're a talent. As the first to respond to me, I want to reward you with a revolver and a lighter. Why is it a revolver and a lighter? But if he's willing to reward me with a weapon, he must admire me and trust me, preparing to put me in an important position. Then it's fine, he simply replied and followed behind Sun Lang to do the craziest thing in the world. A mere 26 people. No, that's not right. There are only 22 people left. And the enemy is Hutu Empire's elite army. He used to be a general of parting fire, so he could judge the enemy's fighting strength from their reaction speed and fighting style. A mere 22 people. They don't even have enough weapons. Only 22 people. What they need to do is to cut through this furious camp and kill their way out. This is an incredibly crazy move. The person who wants to do this must be the madman among madmen. But as he looked at Sun Lang's back, a ridiculous thought appeared in his mind. Although it was ridiculous, he still believed in it. If it's him, he can win. Chapter 528. A very crazy idea. 8 years of military academy life. More than 20 years of military life. Sheffield guaranteed, with his more than 30 years of military experience, that he had never seen such a crazy battle. An imperial warrior, with 21 felons who had just been released from their shackles. No lethal weapons. No resumption of training. No tactical arrangements. It was just a rush of blood and courage, as well as an unreasonable act of recklessness. This temperamental imperial warrior said that he would take a mere 21 people to attack a nest of furious Hutu elites, to cut through layers of barracks and break through to the other side. He had never heard of such a shocking thing. No matter how arrogant and conceited a general was, he wouldn't dare to say such crazy words. There was nothing crazier than this. It was simply a joke. All the Slalos thought so, and all of them cursed in their hearts. They wished they could immediately raise their guns and open a big hole in the back of this madman, but no one had the guts. Now, their slim chance of survival was tied to this man, so they could only rely on him. The choices people made in a predicament would also be deeply imprinted in the depths of their hearts. At least, they had already regarded Sun Lang as the last straw in their despair. The surrounding enemies pressed forward with a loud bang. The Russians were in a desperate situation and were a little crazy, shooting without thinking. But in the middle of the night, these guys were wearing extremely conspicuous white, with a grimace mask like a pig's nose, and the extremely shameless word justice on the back. It was difficult not to notice them. Since they had noticed them, they must have noticed the firearms in their hands. The Empire's elites were already prepared. Seeing the Russians raise their guns, someone shouted, "Shield!" The heavy shield bearers in the front row did not think and immediately raised their large shields to protect themselves. Bang, 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 bang. The strong arm strength of the heavy shield bearers directly withstood the impact of the bullets. They took out their crossbows from the grooves on the back of their shields and shot back blindly. Then, the Imperial side's counterattack followed. The enemy is armed with firearms. Imperial fire array. The machete men in light armor rushed out of the army and rolled on the ground. They used their shields to protect themselves and rolled their machetes forward. The heavy shields behind them stood up and stepped forward. A forest of spears and crossbows stretched out from the gaps of the heavy shields. Lee Fire had always regarded Hutu as his biggest imaginary enemy. But the Empire was also studying his enemy. After all, the Russians were not a regular army. They were shocked when they saw this professional stance, but they were still fierce outlaws. As they fired, they shouted, "Grenadiers!" A few of the Russians carrying grenades revealed crazed grins. They pulled out the bolts and threw them at the other side. This kind of explosive weapon was the enemy of all formations. In a situation where the team did not have heavy firearms, this was the best weapon to turn the tide of the battle. However, the expected scene of the grenades exploding in the enemy's formation and causing flesh and blood to fly everywhere did not happen. When the grenades flew into the air, dozens of soft whistling sounds rose. More than 10 hidden weapon soldiers with deerskin pouches in the formation raised their hands and threw flying locust stones, silver shuttles, iron caltrops, and other hidden weapons into the air. Even though it was difficult to see in the dark, they had the advantage in numbers, so their hit rate was still 100%. With a few muffled explosions, the grenades were all blown up in the air. Flames soared into the sky, waves of air billowed, and fragments flew wildly. Their final trump card was useless. All of this happened very quickly. The confidence of the Russians was destroyed in an instant, and their hearts turned cold. At this moment, Sun Lang's wild laughter rang out. Do you understand now? To the organized Imperial Army, the current firearms are useless. They're still too weak. They haven't even entered the Imperial Army's formation. As he spoke, a rain of arrows came whistling over. The Hall of Swordsmen had already rolled over to this side. Their movements were nimble and skillful, and all the shots were blocked by round shields. Being closed in by such Imperial soldiers, the outcome was easy to imagine. It was over. Everything was over. After all, this was very normal. How could 21 prisoners with some light firearms charge into the elite camp of the strongest country in the world? They were not civilians without any ability to resist. Although they madly pulled the trigger and loaded the ammunition, their hearts were gradually filled with fear. Perhaps they would die in the next moment. They would die here, silently and inexplicably, under the impulse of a madman. Perhaps it was an arrow, perhaps it was a knife. "This one is steady," a shout rang out in their ears. Then the wind blew. In an instant, the continuous rain of arrows fell to the ground powerlessly, and the swordsmen who had rolled over were all sent flying. Sun Lang laughed loudly. "I said that as long as I don't let you die, you won't die." He resolved the fatal crisis in an instant and said loudly, "Now, throw away all your weapons. Throw away all your ammunition. You just need to run. Agon, run." He chopped down with his palm, and the thick tent next to him was smashed to the ground. This way, Sheffield had completely given up on thinking. As he ran, he threw away all the guns and ammunition on his body and rushed after Sun Lang. The other Russians seemed to wake up from a dream and followed one after another. The sounds of fighting were nearby, getting louder and more numerous. The sound of horse hooves and footsteps were the sound of approaching death. Perhaps they would all die on the spot in the next moment. This feeling of wandering in front of the gates of hell. This was the main camp of the Imperial Army. They could only run, silently, madly following that figure. At this time, the camp had already become a pot of porridge. There were shouts of fighting everywhere, and there were continuous sounds of gongs and bugles. Under these circumstances, the 20 or so Russians wearing white coats of justice had nowhere to hide, but Sun Lang had strictly ordered them not to throw away their uniforms. Although he did not say the consequences, everyone obeyed. Everyone knew what the consequences were. Therefore, they had always been in a state of being discovered. Everyone was chasing after them, trying to kill them. They were frantically trying to kill them. There were more and more pursuers behind them. Arrows, short spears, flying axes, and even meteor hammers were constantly flying in their direction. There were shouts of fighting all around them. It was as if they were running in a maze of flames. Perhaps the so-called path of life in front of them would be turned into blazing magma in the next moment. But there was no other way. If they stopped, they would die. There was no time to think. If they thought, they would die. They could only give up on thinking and obey. They could only choose to obey. They only needed to follow and run. There was no need to think about anything else. In any case, the people in front of them would be knocked down by him. In any case, the arrows would be blocked by him. In any case, no one had died yet. Therefore, since they were going to die anyway, they might as well die a little later. There was no room to think about anything else. They just kept running. No one even thought about what would happen if they could cut through the entire camp and break out of the encirclement. The pursuers behind them would still chase after them, and the situation would become even more dangerous. After leaving the complex layout of the camp and coming to the open plains, they were simply targets for the cavalry. Although this danger was obvious, no one was thinking about it anymore. If they thought, they would die. If they obeyed, they would live. They only needed to follow this person. Pay attention, pay attention. After some time of running, a different voice suddenly rang out in their ears. This familiar voice caused everyone's hearts to tremble as if they had just woken up from a dream. He said, "Up ahead, there's a moment of surprise." The Russians looked up ahead. Then, their expressions wildly changed. An open space had been cleared up ahead. Swords and spears were like a forest, and the military formation was like iron. At least 1,000 people were gathered here waiting. This was not a hasty battle like before, but a formation, preparation, and perfect command. Where to run? To the left or to the right? The guide gave the craziest answer. Charge! A rain of arrows whistled over. Spears were leveled, swords were sharp, and shields were indestructible. The forest of steel across from them stood up with a rumble and strode over. This kind of momentum could even seize the souls of ordinary people and cause them to instantly collapse. But the person in front of them was still the same as before, meeting them without another word. Thus, the bodies of the 21 Slalos instinctively responded. Their bodies reacted before their brains did. 21 coats fluttered in the wind. 21 righteousness fluttered in the air. 21 white clothes converged into a white dragon and rushed towards the surging black clouds. Then, the clouds were separated. Sun Lang rushed towards the shield wall like a cannonball and punched at the sturdy shield. The well-tempered shield was shaking. The tremors were transmitted to the shield-bearer's body, to his companion's body, and through the spear on his shoulder to the spearman behind him. The tremors were like ripples that continued to vibrate. Finally, it was transmitted to almost everyone in the formation. Everyone's body was paralyzed for a moment. Then the second punch, like the sound of a bell. A huge force erupted in an instant. The black clouds were separated, and the heavy shield bearers in the shield bearers line began to sway as if they were drunk. The first layer of defense. Then, Sun Lang wrapped his arms around 7 or 8 spears on his left and right. He clamped them under his ribs. His body leaned forward, so much so that he pressed against the shield in front of him. His whole body exerted force. Up, push. The heavy shield bearers at the front were pushed back. They crashed into the spearmen behind them. The spearmen crashed into the sword shield bearers. The sword shield bearers crashed into the crossbowmen. The crossbowmen crashed into the reserves. One after another, layer after layer. They couldn't stop, they couldn't stop. One person couldn't stop, 2 people couldn't stop, 5 people couldn't stop, 10 people couldn't stop, 20 people couldn't stop, 100 people couldn't stop, 200 people couldn't stop them. In just one exchange, hundreds of elite soldiers were pushed back by Sun Lang alone. No one could even react to what had happened. Trash, a bunch of trash, you useless trash, incompetent idiots, pathetic insects. Sun Lang's laughter became crazier. Why don't you King bring another 300,000 people? His hands separated. The soldiers who were huddled together suddenly felt a huge force that they couldn't resist and suddenly threw them to the side. The black clouds parted to form a path. No one could stop him. In an instant, the formation was broken. It was broken through by a completely incomprehensible and absurd method. The soldiers who were pushed to the side and almost couldn't stand still had expressions of bewilderment and shock. And then there was unstoppable fury. This was a disgrace that had to be washed away with the blood of the enemy. but the person involved wouldn't consider their feelings. Sun Lang laughed wildly. Keep up. The Russians behind Sun Lang witnessed this scene of pure violence from the most direct point of view. A single person using the most primitive strength against a fully armed army. This kind of scene made one's blood boil more than the opening fire of any gun or cannon. The more skilled the Slaller people were in the way of firearms, the more they advocated individual courage and bravery. After hearing Sun Lang's order, their movements were even swifter than before. Even if this army had only broken through their formation, opened up a path, and the soldiers who had been thrown to the side hadn't even been seriously injured and had instead become even more furious. Charging into that path under these circumstances meant that they would have to face the encirclement of the two armies of the Empire, just like stepping into a trap. But who the F***CK cared? They already didn't care about such things at all. They just needed to follow. No one was left behind. Everyone scrambled to follow Sun Lang's footsteps and rushed into the path that had been forcibly opened up. The soldiers of the Empire who had been thrown to the side had already stood firm. Their swords, spears, swords, and halberds fiercely stabbed at them. No one would care, because Sun Lang's figure turned into a white light. In an instant, he appeared on the left wing of the Slaller people. His hands waved at a speed that surpassed the limits of human speed. Every move was precise and swift, without the slightest mistake. In a moment, he blocked all the stabbing weapons. Then he flashed to the right and neutralized the killing moves with the same speed. Front, back, left, right? The Slaller people were constantly moving forward. They could see the charging figure in front of them. But this figure might appear at their side in an instant and block the stabbing weapons from the side. No matter how dangerous it was, he would always appear at the most appropriate moment, not a second late or a second early. It was as if he already knew that the arrow would be shot at that moment. With the experience and insight of the Russians, they could only attribute this to an indescribable, mysterious power. This was because the words Empire's warrior were enough to explain all the supernatural phenomena and terrifying combat strength. But Sheffield was different. He had previously held high position in the Kingdom of Fire, so he could see more. For example, he could see the essence of this matter. As he quickly moved forward, he looked at the constantly moving figure. He was like the wind. It was impossible to catch his figure with the naked eye. While he was constantly knocking down the enemies in front of him, he was also constantly neutralizing the dangers that the Slaller people encountered. The timing of his appearance was incomparably accurate. Not a single person was injured. Sheffield's heart was wildly beating. This matter was even more ridiculous than Sun Lang wanting to bring 21 people to charge into the camp. This terrifying ability, insight, speed, and experience was definitely not something that could be achieved by so-called martial arts cultivation. This was because this was not something that a warrior could achieve. This was an ability that belonged to the battlefield. He ruled over this battlefield. Everyone, no matter if it was the enemy's movement or the movement of his allies, is within his grasp. He knows what will happen in the next moment. He even knows when an arrow shot by an archer 200 meters behind him will arrive and where it will be shot. Even though this was a battlefield filled with killing intent and terrifying heat, Sheffield's back was still drenched in cold sweat. Impossible, he told himself. This matter was too absurd and too incomprehensible. If this ability was not a gift from the gods or some kind of innate talent, then it must be experience. Battle experience that far surpasses what humans can imagine. In a battlefield in battle that humans cannot imagine, he fought to the final victory and faced enemies and disadvantages that humans cannot imagine. Moreover, in a battle that was almost destined to end in death, he killed all the enemies and survived. Therefore, experience becomes talent, battle becomes instinct, skill becomes a legend, and thus obtained terrifying strength. But how is this possible? With his age, even if he participated in the Tianyuan War and participated in all the great battles that Hood have fought in the later stages of the war, he would not be able to obtain such experience. Moreover, the Empire had never had any related records or propaganda. There was no such shocking legend of one man fighting against thousands. How did he do it? Sheffield was puzzled by this mystery and felt a deep sense of fear. This kind of person could only make people feel fear. It meant that the greatest power that the human organization called the country had could not kill him. The greatest scale of violence in human history could not kill him. The army could not kill him, because the person who ruled the battlefield was him. If he could achieve this level, there was no difference between 1,000 people and 1,000,000 people. Because no matter how many enemies there were, he had to deal with at most a few thousand people at the same time. Just like now. Just like he had promised, not a single Slaro died in battle. Not even a single person was injured. Even not a single enemy died in battle. If Sheffield felt fear amidst the shock, then the Slaro people became more and more fanatical. Humans always had the instinct to obey the strong, and the Empire person in front of them, although crazy, overbearing, and temperamental, if he was strong enough that everyone had to look up to him, then all his shortcomings would not matter. Sun Lang was still leading the charge, charging. He had already shaken off the 1,000-man team that intercepted him and continued to move forward. He was unstoppable and broke through all the defenses. The white dragon galloped in the military camp. The 21 righteous coats would inevitably become something that many soldiers of the Empire would never forget in their lives. They had already rushed through more than half of the camp, rushed through 2 interceptions, and in front of them was a group of military horses blocking their way. Many strong soldiers in the army had also joined the battle, but all the Slaro people were still running wildly. As long as they followed this person, everything would be fine. This time, the general who set up the military formation had already received the news that the person who led the attack was a martial arts expert that was hard to find in the world. He was a terrifying enemy that was rarely seen in the world. They had already made thorough preparations. But it was not enough. That terrifying figure rushed over with 21 people. Then they rushed over. No one was injured, whether they were enemies or allies. But to the soldiers of the Empire, this kind of mercy was not kindness, but the most unforgettable contempt. You're like toys in my hands. I can beat you into a sorry state and make you flee in panic, and not a single one of you will die. Whether it was an ordinary soldier, an elite warrior, a peerless war general, or a peerless expert, all of them would be beaten down, no one an exception. The white dragon charged through the boiling camp. The soldiers of the Empire went from confusion to anger, from anger to rage, from rage to powerlessness, from powerlessness to fear. They had never heard of such a thing, never seen such a martial art. And then they began to consider another matter. Why didn't he kill people? They didn't know how many enemies they had charged, how many enemies they had repelled, but the Russians could clearly sense that their resistance and pursuit was dwindling. They didn't know why. Until the thick fence of the camp was right in front of them. Sun Lang punched out, and the thick wooden fence exploded. 22 people charged out. The battle cries behind them were no longer as angry and urgent as before. Sun Lang didn't stop, so the Slalos didn't stop either. After they rushed out of the camp, they went west and then turned north. Then, they faintly heard the horn of retreat coming from the direction of the camp. Sun Lang stopped. The Russians also stopped. The two sides looked at each other in silence until Sun Lang slowly said, "You can laugh now." Then he laughed heartily. Soon, the Russians also laughed wildly. They lay on the ground, sat on the ground, lay on the ground, and laughed wildly, thumping their chests. Just as Sun Lang had said before, they would always remember this pleasant night. It was very pleasant. It was likely that these Slalos would never forget this experience for the rest of their lives. This was no longer some thrilling escape from death. They had personally experienced a legend. This was a crazy scene that even heroic epics didn't dare to describe, and they were the ones who had experienced it. A seed had been quietly planted in the depths of their hearts. In less than a day, it only took less than a day for a group of twisted, evil, wanton, and crazy felons to show signs of turning over a new leaf. Courier landed on the blazing angel, and she watched the whole process from above. Yen Wei said with conviction, "You're probably the strongest man in the world. But what's the point of doing this? Is it just to convince them?" Sun Lang shook his head silently. He turned to look in the direction of the camp and said lightly, "Of course not. Apart from that, it's also a small greeting to tell an old friend something." Courier understood and chuckled. "Then they must have a very deep impression." "Yes." Sun Lang's mood seemed to be a little strange, as if he had remembered something from before. He repeated, "Very deep." Chapter 529. A Field of Chicken Feathers, a Field of Chicken Feathers. The battle that had just occurred could be ranked in the top 10 of the most ridiculous and mysterious battles in the past 100 years. The process was so absurd that it was as if a meteorite had fallen from the sky after they had gained the upper hand in a fierce battle and coincidentally crashed into their camp, causing the entire army to be routed. What kind of F***king situation was this? This was the first time the Imperial Envoy Force formed from the elites of the six armies had been deployed by the court after the end of the Great War of Tianyuan. In the blink of an eye, they had suffered an unprecedented defeat. This dramatic attack on the camp almost made them doubt their lives. Almost everyone was dumbfounded and did not know what to do. Who am I? Where am I? What am I doing? After the battle, the camp was devastated. Some places still emitted a shocking stench. Water had become the most scarce resource because many people were clamoring to bathe and wash the dirty places. The terrifying black and green substance had splattered everywhere, giving off a smell that was unknown whether it was a stench or a fragrance. Fortunately, it had only been 2 years since the end of the Great War of Tianyuan. The military discipline of the empire was still strict. These soldiers were also the elites of the world. After suffering such a defeat, although they doubted their lives, it was not a total defeat. They still maintained the dignity and pride of the empire's soldiers. Under the command of the generals, they consciously began to restore order. After all, the Central Army camp had finally issued an order. At this moment, in front of the Central Army camp, a dozen generals in full armor were half kneeling on the ground with their heads down dejectedly. After suffering such an earth-shattering defeat, not only had everyone lost face, it was also difficult to absolve themselves from blame. According to military law, each of them had to be punished. If the general wanted to cut off their heads, they had nothing to say. Previously, the Central Army camp had finally regained its ability to command. After a short period of silence, General Tensei finally sent out messengers to inform the generals. They began to methodically assign tasks and rectify the chaos. After the generals had carefully completed their tasks, they ran back to report and asked for forgiveness. At the same time, they asked if she had any new instructions. After waiting for a while, they were finally granted an audience. The dozen or so young talents of the Empire's new generation all exchanged glances and then filed in. The first thing they saw was that General Tensei's tent was filled with intense sword and saber scars. Empress, on the other hand, was fully armed with heavy armor that covered his entire body. Only his face was exposed. He sat on the main seat and held a golden saber in his right hand. None of the generals were unfamiliar with this blade. The name of the saber was Tianyuan. It was forged 30 years ago by the Imperial Army with the help of the Emperor's Ministry of Finance. It was used to show the Empire's determination to fight against the Sky Demon and its attitude of wanting to win this war. It accompanied the Emperor himself into battle and drank the blood of the Sky Demon. Later, the Emperor bestowed it to Empress Tensei as a reward for his beloved daughter's outstanding military service on the Tianyuan battlefield. For a soldier, it was a supreme honor. For a general of the imperial family, it meant extremely high power and status. After all, the nature of the Tianyuan saber, which was bestowed by the emperor, was equivalent to an imperial sword. It meant that the emperor had given the power of life and death to the wielder of the saber. The wielder of the saber could behead treacherous people and openly despise the dignity of the country's judicial system. This was the so-called right to kill first and report later. Due to the great origin of this blade, many people's hearts skipped a beat. In theory, after eating such a big loss tonight, even if Empress Concubine raised her blade and beheaded all of them, they wouldn't have a place to cry out their grievances. Moreover, They knew that General Tensei must be in a very bad mood at this time. Think about it. There were countless sword scars here. The Emperor's concubine was fully armed and had even taken out the Heaven Origin saber. However, the bandits were still charging left and right in the camp as if there was no one around. In the end, they brought along 21 fire barbarians who didn't know any martial arts and escaped safely. This meant that the famous Tianyuan saber was not able to behead the treacherous people. A few clever people immediately knelt down and begged for forgiveness. A lowly general's guard was not good enough. Fortunately, Your Highness was able to defeat the treacherous people. Your Highness is really invincible. God bless the bloodline of the true dragon. Unfortunately, His Highness's mood seemed to be really bad now, so all the flattery went to the wrong place. Empress coldly snorted, and her voice was inexplicably hoarse. That treacherous person came and went freely in the camp. His martial arts were so high that it was rare in the world, but I was able to defeat him. It seems that my martial arts are better than that treacherous person. I didn't expect that I was such a peerless master. It seems that I can go to the Tianju Mountain next year to discuss swords. The flatterers were snubbed, and the other generals who did not have time to speak also came back to their senses. They all knelt down and begged for forgiveness. A lowly general is incompetent. Your Highness, please punish me. Empress was silent for a moment, and then sighed. The soldiers fought with their lives and fought with all their might. Everyone vowed to fight to the death. There is nothing to criticize. This is not the fault of fighting, and it is not that you are incompetent. It is just that the enemy is too cunning. She tried to suppress the trembling of her voice. In fact, she was already very good to be able to sit here and face the generals calmly. She had seen Sun Lang's demonstration. What that person had just done. She still underestimated him. How did he become so strong? How could it be like this? Her Highness Empress was confused at this time. After a moment of silence, she said, "How are the casualties?" A general in the front row clasped his fist and said, "Your Highness, there are many casualties." Starting from the commanders of the camps, Zhu Dalong, Qian Yuanshuang, Mao Tong, Bei Haishan, and the others encountered the enemy. They fought with their lives and were all defeated. Their injuries varied, and they are all unconscious. They're being treated by the doctors in the army. All the generals and soldiers are injured. There are some who were shot by arrows, beaten unconscious, and pushed. They're being treated. Empress said impatiently, "How many casualties are there?" The general hesitated for a moment, and then said in a low voice, "Your Highness, no casualties have been found so far. Only 4 headless corpses were found in the northeast of the camp. The heads that flew out were all barbarians. I can guarantee that no one will die. Naturally, I can also kill all of you. The latter is 100 times easier than the former." This was his demonstration. The Emperor's concubine silently clenched her left fist tightly. She asked slowly, "How was the order in the camp being restored?" Another general stepped out and said, "Your Highness, after your order was issued, all the troops have begun to count the losses, clean up the camp, and treat the wounded. The troops with less casualties have begun to restore the defense. The cavalry has been deployed to patrol and be on alert, but the morale of all the troops is low. If I were to lead a cavalry to launch a surprise attack, I would be able to utterly defeat you within an hour. If I did not do so." This was his demonstration. Empress asked slowly again. The enemy attacked with filth and polluted the water source. How was the progress of collecting water? The general in charge of this work hurriedly said, "A lowly general sent 5 water collecting teams to collect water from different sections of the river. He personally escorted 1 team. In the end, all 5 teams returned safely with water. After careful inspection by the military doctors, all the water is safe and non-toxic. A lowly general has now followed the military drill and boiled the water for the soldiers to drink and wash their bodies. Everything is going smoothly. I can poison the water source. I can continuously harass the water collecting teams, cut off your water, and make your soldiers stinky and thirsty. They will slowly become irritable and crazy. But I didn't do that. This was his demonstration. It was like the words he often said to her. Although she didn't understand, it was very appropriate. I, Doryman, am going to make things difficult for you, fat tiger. How am I fat? She remembered this kind of response in the past. The joking teasing and slightly dissatisfied rebuking. This kind of time could never go back. Now, there were enemies who had to kill each other. They were enemies who couldn't live under the same sky. The matter 2 years ago was incited by her father and had been planned for a long time. Today, she officially became his enemy. Only now did she know what kind of monster she was facing. I can come once every day. Every time, I will run over them like now, until they lose all will to resist and become defeated. I can come every night and disturb her peace. I can kill people. Every day, I can kill one person until they collapse from paranoia. I can destroy all of you by myself, no matter how many people there are. More importantly, the above tactics were applicable to all the armies of the Empire. There was no more rebellious demonstration than this. But she sadly found that she didn't have many effective countermeasures. It was effective under the premise that it didn't anger him. Otherwise, there were many such methods, but it would only lead to one result. That was, Sun Lang would completely turn to a mad dog. He would launch an endless revenge against the Empire and turn Kyushu into a sea of fire. No one could kill him. He had proven that tonight. She sighed softly and nodded. I know. Tonight, everyone fought against the enemy with all their strength. It was impeccable. The loss of this battle is not your fault. I won't pursue it. Now is an eventful time. This trip to Mingzhou won't be peaceful. I hope everyone works hard and doesn't slack off. She thought for a while and ordered, send skilled doctors to treat the wounded. After you return to the camp, pay attention to appease your subordinates and stabilize their morale. Someone hesitated and said, Your Highness, should we send someone to the nearby prefecture to ask for help? A cold light flashed in Empress's eyes. She said coldly, No need. The news of tonight's incident must be kept secret. Otherwise, not only will I lose face, but I'm afraid you won't benefit from it either. Even so, there must be some spies in the camp. I'm afraid this matter can't be kept secret for long. I can only try to delay it. But it's not all bad. You should understand how terrifying Sun Lang is now, so that you won't do something stupid. All the generals' faces turned serious. They bowed and accepted the order. Empress sighed softly in her heart. Her eyes fell on 2 figures among the generals. She hesitated for a while and said, Today, the enemy almost attacked the Central Army. If it weren't for my father's protection, I'm afraid I would have been killed. We must guard against this. We need brave and loyal generals who are skilled in martial arts to protect me. However, as a woman, it's inconvenient for a man to protect me. She said softly, General Lin, Leader Shui, I've long heard of your outstanding military achievements and martial arts. You're both women. Are you willing to temporarily lead your troops to protect me? The gazes of the generals fell on the 2 of them. There was envy and jealousy in their eyes. Lin Daiyu and Shui Baochai were famous heroines in the 6 armies of Tianyuan. Compared to a group of male generals, their military achievements and qualifications were not inferior at all. The Great War of Tianyuan had brought about countless achievements and heroes. Whether it was appearance, figure, family background, martial arts, or military achievements, they were all top-notch. Such beautiful flowers with both talent and beauty were enough to move the hearts of all men. They were also the perfect wives in the eyes of the sons of the noble clans. However, they had always kept their chastity and had never married. These young talents looked at them with envy, admiration, jealousy, and fear in their eyes. The only thing they didn't have was a desire to possess them. They had been able to climb to their current position because they were relatively clear-headed people. The elders in their families had also warned them time and time again. Some people were not to be touched, because there was a bloody example before them. About a year ago, a relative of the Marquis saw General Shui by chance and was immediately shocked. Although General Shui claimed to be a widow, the customs of the Empress were open. In addition, the country needed to increase the population after the war. The country also encouraged widows to remarry. What was this? However, the Marquis was smart. He knew that General Shui was a general of Tianyuan and couldn't be forced. Therefore, he took the opportunity to enter the palace and acted coquettishly to his aunt, Empress. He wanted to borrow the power of the royal family to arrange a marriage. After all, even if you were a general of the country and had outstanding achievements, you still dared to refuse an imperial edict from the emperor. You had to marry him even if you didn't want to. There was no such thing as the imperial harem interfering in politics. In addition, the Marquis had the intention to hide it. Empress didn't think too much about it. She also saw that her nephew was heartbroken and was moved. She sent people out of the palace to contact General Shui and reveal her intention to marry him. On the other hand, she planned to discuss this matter with the emperor when he came. But everything was too late when the emperor knew. The court of the Empress Hoodoo had not seen for decades. The scribes who recorded the court meeting even broke a few brushes. A group of court officials roared in the Golden Palace, scolded their relatives for abusing power, and the imperial harem for interfering in politics. They almost pointed at the emperor's nose. At the same time, Tianyuan, which was usually divided and had endless internal strife, showed an unprecedented unity. The memorials to impeach the Marquis almost collapsed the desk in the library pavilion. The officials who were not of high rank were confused and didn't know what the lords were angry about. Only some senior officials who knew the inside story but stayed out of it exchanged meaningful glances with each other. The words, "you know," were written in their eyes. The Empress was naturally scared out of her wits and immediately sent someone to apologize to General Shui. That audacious Marquis fled back to his fief in terror, but this matter was clearly not over. On a dark and windy night, the mansion of the Marquis was burned to the ground. Neither man nor beast escaped. The body of the Marquis was also found in the ruins. When the news reached the capital, Empress was so angry that she vomited blood. In her fury, she ordered a thorough investigation. But the Supreme Court pretended to be deaf and dumb. The Ministry of Justice made excuses, and the Sixth Fan School delayed the investigation. Although the emperor angrily rebuked them, there was no actual punishment at all. The three departments understood and soon submitted an investigation report on the fire in the mansion of the Marquis. After all, the Empress was not reconciled to the death of her eldest nephew. She ordered the Imperial Guards to secretly investigate. The commander of the Imperial Guards had just received the order when he found that the Imperial Guards had been handed a threatening letter. Fuck you. The Imperial Guards were handed a threatening letter. Fuck you. Although he cursed in his heart, the commander almost fell to his knees when he opened the letter. There was no writing on the letter. There was only a bloody handprint. And the military seals of more than half of the high-ranking generals in the 6 armies of the Empire, from the Grand Commandant and the Great General to the Marquis of the Horse Infantry. Low-ranking officials were not qualified to be stamped on it. There were also the seals of the court officials who were transferred from military to civil officials after the war. It was so densely packed that it made one's legs go weak. It was so blatant. But the commander of the Imperial Guards did not even have the courage to present it to the emperor. He could only silently burn it. This kind of thing could only be burned. It was useless to keep it in his hands. He would never have a chance to use it. If he did something he should not do, not to mention the emperor, even the emperor would have to bow his head in front of this piece of paper. At the same time, Empress also received a threatening letter. There was only one sentence in the main message. Your eldest nephew died in vain. No one will pay for it. I heard that you have an older brother. In such a country, not to mention the imperial harem interfering in politics, Empress did not even have the right to speak. Decades of war meant that the military power of the military officials had expanded infinitely. Although this matter caused an uproar, only a small number of people knew the cause and effect and the key points in it. But this did not prevent everyone from learning from it. The emperor, who had been insulted to the point that he could only apologize to the officials on behalf of the empress, who had not shown her face for half a year, a certain marquis who had died mysteriously, the imperial uncle, who had been hiding in his fief like a turtle and did not dare to show his face, and the other relatives who had been affected, Everyone came to this conclusion. Some women could not be touched. But those who did not know would never know what kind of background Shwe Baochai and Lindai Yu had. But no one dared to have any wishful thinking towards them, especially this group of young talents. They had been warned time and time again, to the extent that going too far was as bad as not going far enough. They were afraid that if they smiled at General Shwe, the old man at home would suddenly jump out from the side and drag them back to break their legs. General Lin and General Shwe looked at each other. Every woman had a habit when going to battle. They always wore a full-body helmet or a ferocious and scary mask after putting on a helmet. Whether it was to hide their overly beautiful and not intimidating faces or to protect their faces, in short, they had not taken off their helmets. Although they could not see their expressions, they could see the displeasure in each other's eyes. However, although the Emperor's concubine's tone was that of discussion, there wasn't much room for discussion. They sighed silently and bowed at the same time. A lowly general obeys. But at the same time, there was a strange feeling in their hearts, as if they had missed something very important. Chapter 530. 7 to 8 miles northwest of the camp, Sun Lang and the others were resting in a small ravine. Water, food, and sleeping bags were prepared here. The ones who needed to rest were the members of the Arkham Squadron. Yes, after escaping from the encirclement, Sun Lang took the opportunity to announce the names of the Slalos. No one had any objections, even though they did not know what Arkham meant. At this moment, they were sitting together, skewering the steamed buns and meat jerky with wooden sticks and roasting them over the fire. When the meat jerky sizzled and oil came out, they smeared the oil on the steamed buns and ate them together. Although the staple food of the Livefire Nation was bread, this was the Empire. They had to get used to it. Sun Lang sat furthest away from the wind with no one around him. The Russian sat not far away, so the distance between them was a respectful distance. This was the privilege of the strong and the leader. Courier sat beside him. People from the hunting tribes had good cooking skills. They were at the level where they could directly use barbecued meat to tame divine beasts. She sprinkled all kinds of spices on the meat and took out a bottle of wine from the supply compartment of the Blazing Angel. She handed it to Sun Lang. "It will take a while. You want to have some first?" Sun Lang didn't really like drinking. After all, he only liked to drink fruit juices, carbonated drinks, and VC lemon tea. Many people knew that he didn't like drinking. For example, during the Tian Yuan War, the generals drank either Tang Zhou Jade Hammer or Shanzhou Golden Plate Dew. Only the Grand Marshal drank lychee cream, deer pear water, collusion paste, Wuling Deshun powder, and other drinks. It didn't look very manly, but his rank was too high and his temper was not easy to understand. He was quite temperamental, so no one dared to ask him to drink. If you proposed a toast to him, he would definitely drink the fruit juice. If you joked that not drinking a glass of wine was not giving him face, then he might really not give you face. At that time, he would be grabbed by the marshal in front of everyone and punched until he was dizzy. Then he would be kicked out. A good thing would become a bad thing. That would be really F***ed up. After all, you were humiliated on the spot and became a laughingstock. You must have resentment in your heart, and the marshal must also feel that you have resentment in your heart. Since you must hate me, then I must kill you first. There is nothing wrong with this logic. Therefore, in this world, only subordinates would be forced to drink with them. No one had ever heard of a leader being forced to drink with them. However, as the news spread, the Grand Marshal's dislike of drinking changed to the Grand Marshal only drinking with people he liked. If you were lucky enough to have the Grand Marshal take the initiative to drink with you, and what you drank was alcohol, then you would have profited. This was enough for you to brag about for the rest of your life. Therefore, people were despicable. When Sun Lang saw Mao Mei handing over the bottle of wine, he instinctively wanted to refuse, but his heart suddenly moved. He curled his lips and reached out to take the bottle. He flicked open the cork with his thumb and drank a few mouthfuls. Then, he rolled his eyes and said, "Isn't this wine from your side?" Courier said indifferently, "Of course, Hutu's wine is all hidden in jars." There is no such packaging. This is table wine number 21, also known as bread wine, produced by the Royal Winery. Sun Lang was stunned for a moment. This isn't vodka? Vodka? Courier frowned and repeated the name. The pronunciation is very similar to the word for water in Slalor. This is wine. Sun Lang was stunned for a moment before he remembered that in this era, the trademark of vodka had not been registered yet. He laughed. Then let's call Zhang Jinyuan's new wine vodka. That kind of thing doesn't matter. Mao Mei had no interest in this kind of business. As a battle maniac, she knew nothing about the power of capital. All she cared about was war. Glancing at the group of Russians sitting around, she said, "You have already established a preliminary prestige in their hearts. What are you going to do next?" Next, Sun Lang put down the bottle in his hand and said, "After resting for a while, you will take them back. Let them wear their mighty military coats and bring a new spirit back to their companions. Let their companions see. I have already arranged the specific situation." Courier laughed. "You are really cunning." Sun Lang smiled slightly. "For these twisted, crazy scum who can't see the future and don't care about hope. When the goods who are no different from them suddenly get a new life and become different from them, such a thing will undoubtedly make them surprised, jealous, curious, and even envious." Mao Mei asked again, "What about you? Are you going to continue the attack?" Hearing this, a strange look appeared on Sun Lang's face. He said slowly, "The attack is useless. With that woman's temper, she will definitely make the two of them her bodyguards. Therefore, the decapitation operation will not work. Then, even if we attack the camp again, it will be meaningless because she will immediately take command and dispatch." Courier wondered, "The two of them? Who?" Sun Lang took another sip of wine to drown his sorrows. After a moment of silence, he said gloomily, "Relatives." As an excellent hunter, Mao Mei had the intuition of a wild beast. When she saw Sun Lang's expression, she immediately guessed with her female intuition. "Old lover?" Sun Lang shouted. "This is the Azura Arena. How can you call it an old lover? Damn it, you haven't even had a chicken before." Those who have had are scum. Those who haven't had are all pure harem lovers. Pure love? Do you understand? I don't understand. Mother told me that love is love. Love is to have passionate intercourse, enjoy and demand. There's no such thing as pure or impure. Courier gave Sun Lang advice based on the unrestrained view of love in the northern tribes. "I think your problem is that you think too much and K too little." It hit the nail on the head, so much so that Sun Lang was stunned by this simple and unadorned attack. She waved her hand and said with a graceful tone, "If you ask me, there's no such thing. Are those two-year-old lovers? I've heard that the Emperor's concubine is also an outstanding beauty. You took advantage of the enemy's unstable morale, and their defenses were weak to kill them. You sneaked into their tent and did all three of them in one pot. With your martial arts, how could they possibly resist? Father also told me before that when a man wants to tame a woman, he can't use sweet words to please her. He has to use a whip. You have to use your whip. Your father's really terrible." Up until now, Sun Lang still hadn't told Mao Mei that his big bodyguard was a female killer. If he really did, as she said, he was afraid that in half an hour, 3 people's lives would be lost. After all, if he said this, it would be embarrassing and also push Yin Luo into the line of fire. After all, Ms. Zhao now didn't see eye to eye with Yin Luo. He waved his hand and said, "Well, I have my own plans. You don't have to worry about it." Courier was still a little unsatisfied, but when she heard Sun Lang say this, she knew that this topic had to end here. She was still a little unsatisfied and asked, "I'll escort these people back. What about you?" Sun Lang turned his head and looked at the direction of the camp meaningfully. He smiled and said, "Attack their hearts." At this time, the barbecue was done. Courier used a knife to cut it and gave one to Sun Lang and one for herself. The two of them ate some of the food on table 21 and filled their stomachs. They didn't speak anymore. After eating, Sun Lang stood up. Sheffield, who was eating, had been paying attention to Sun Lang's movements. He immediately stood up. The Russians beside him were stunned for a moment before they also stood up. Then, all the Russians hurriedly stood up. Sun Lang first smiled approvingly at Sheffield. With his kind of EQ and eyesight, he was thrown into prison. Then he looked at the Arkham members that he had intimidated and said, "Trash, it seems that after tonight's outing, you already know how to get along with me." Quite a few of the Russians couldn't help but smile. Sun Lang also smiled. "You can all go back and rest now. I order you to rush back through the night. The blazing angel will guide you. You should feel honored, because you are already very different from your idiotic cellmates." Proudly tell them about today's story and experience, and take a good rest. This is what you deserve. Sheffield was a very sensible person. When he said goodbye, he was still the first to salute Sun Lang. The others couldn't help but salute as well. After all, they had a master who was both unpredictable and powerful. He might not remember what you did, but what others did and you didn't do, haha. In other words, Sheffield's desire to show off was too strong. There shouldn't be such a stupid spy, right? Or did he do it on purpose to clear himself of suspicion? The blazing angel took to the air. The 21 Russians got on their horses and returned to the north. Sun Lang watched them leave. After a while, he chuckled. "Actually, I should have attracted a group of cavalry, killed them on the way, and made a fire for them." But Sun Lang recalled the two beautiful figures he saw in the camp. His heart softened and shook his head. "Forget it. I'm in a good mood today. I won't kill anymore." He clapped his hands to shake off the oil and spices on his hands. After rubbing his hands a few times, there was no longer any strange smell on them. He then shook his hands and headed back to the camp. Ihuhan San and back. If the officers and soldiers in the camp, who had suffered a great defeat, knew that the thieves who had attacked them in the night had actually swaggered back, treating this place as a place where they could come and go as they pleased, they would be so angry that they would vomit 3 liters of blood. Although this group of elites suffered a defeat, but did not fall into disorder, they still managed to clean up the mess, strengthen their patrols, and increase the number of patrol guards by 3 times. However, Sun Lang still managed to sneak in without anyone noticing. He was familiar with military affairs and knew that after the great battle, just now, the various divisions had lost a lot of weapons and had to strengthen their defenses. The armory must have been opened to send out the dragon-slaying saber. Therefore, he observed the layout of the surroundings and deduced the location of the armory through his experience. He quietly sneaked over and stole a field officer's uniform. After putting it on, he began to walk in the camp righteously. Originally, Empress Tensei was proficient in military affairs, and this group of soldiers could also be considered elites. Therefore, the military discipline should have been extremely strict. However, the current situation was chaotic, and the composition of the army was extremely complicated. The soldiers from all sides did not know each other, and this allowed Sun Lang to take advantage of another loophole. What was even more amazing was that this fellow had been in the Tianyuan army for 6 years and was familiar with all the military rules. He knew all kinds of dirty talk like the back of his hand. Therefore, he walked through the camp with his chest puffed out. Because his expression was too magnanimous, his actions too natural, and his speech too professional, no one suspected that he was a spy. On the contrary, Sun Lang took the opportunity to go around and chat with people. Seeing people, he spoke human language. Seeing ghosts, he spoke ghost language. Not only did he clearly understand the situation of each battalion, he also scared those people into a daze. Just as I expected, he pondered as he walked and said to himself, "This woman has indeed taken a group of soldiers from each of the 6 armies. The commanders of each camp are all young talents of the new generation. If I go on a killing spree here tonight, I'll probably become a mortal enemy with a bunch of old bastards in the imperial court. That's not right. The fathers of these little brats are not simple characters. They must know that the journey to Mingzhou is not easy. Why would they be willing to let their sons and nephews jump in? Oh ho, it seems that the emperor is also exerting his strength inside, so they can't resist. But they must have warned them beforehand." Sun Lang thought for a moment and suddenly revealed a kind smile. "Then, let's go visit a few nephews first." He patiently asked a few people and finally pieced together the location of the Jinwu camp under the Badu army. Then, he hurried over. The Badu army was formed in the middle of the Tianyuan War. Its predecessor was a militia organization formed spontaneously by the people of Suizhou, Qinhang, and Suizhou to resist the Sky Demon. At first, its composition was extremely complicated. Its purpose was for the country gentry to save themselves. Wealthy merchants and country gentry paid for it. They recruited armed escorts, mercenaries, rangers, martial artists, and other people from all walks of life to form a motley crew. They actually slowly made a name for themselves. Later on, they made a name for themselves and were incorporated into the imperial court. The general of this generation's Badu army was called Qian Miao. He was known as the Sea Dragon King. It was also in his generation that the Badu army slowly changed its function, transforming from a third-class army to a first-class navy. It was just that the military reform of the Eight Capitals army was somewhat incomprehensible. No one knew whose opinion the Eight Capitals army had listened to or whose support they had received, but their organization had suddenly doubled, making the navy no longer look like a navy and the horse infantry no longer look like a horse infantry. While reforming the navy, they still retained the elite horse infantry troops used for fighting on the shore, and they were all extremely capable of fighting. The Jinwu Battalion was one of these battalions. As for the mystery behind this, perhaps only the initiator would know. Sun Lang arrived at the 4th Class Cavalry Camp. It was as relaxed as if he had just returned home. The general of this camp was called Qian Yuanshuang. He was Qian Miao's son. According to seniority, he had to call him uncle. Not long ago, his uncle's son had used his iron fist to spoil nephew Qian. Now, of course, he had to show some concern, sneaking in, entering the camp, and beating people in one go. In a split second, the guards and military doctors were all knocked out by Sun Lang. He sat down in front of nephew Qian's bed and lovingly gave him 2 big slaps on the face. Nephew Qian slowly opened his eyes with a dumbfounded expression. He immediately saw a face with a gentle expression. He smiled and asked, "You're awake?" Chapter 531. Qian Yuanshuang had a splitting headache. At this moment, he had just woken up from his coma. His entire body was in a daze, and then he slowly remembered what had happened before. Thief had entered the camp. At that time, he was patrolling the area on the observation deck when he suddenly heard the sound of fighting. When he took a closer look, he saw a guy wearing a black suit with the words, "I'm a suspicious person," written on his face, running away in a flirtatious manner. Behind him was a large group of angry soldiers who were shouting to kill. However, that guy didn't panic at all. As he ran, he mischievously waved his hand behind him and let out a bell-like laugh. A thief had entered the military camp, so he must be caught and beaten to death. Qian Yuanshuang did not say another word. He jumped off the lookout tower, called for his soldiers to bring his 2 large hammers, and led his subordinates to take a shortcut to block the person. Based on the principle of this general does not accept nameless ghosts under his hammer, quickly report your name. He first introduced himself and then asked the general to report his name. Who would have thought that the other party would not pay attention and actually... Wait, he seemed to have said something, right? He had said, Li Yuanfeng sold himself to bring peace to the world. The next sentence was, Lu Jinyue's father and mother are dead. These were the words that his father, General Qian Miao, liked to say all day long. It was to the extent that the brothers had been branded with the mark of hatred since they were young. Li Yuanfeng, a younger brother who relied on selling his but to start his career. He used his but to deal with people, a disgraceful thing. Lu Jinyue, who rejoiced in grandiose achievements, did not care about his soldiers and often coaxed his allies to do the same. Among the generals of Tianyuan, this person's 18 generations of relatives and elders should be the most frequently mentioned. But the problem was, what did he know these 2 words? Little General Qian did not even have time to ask these questions before he was easily defeated by the other party. He thought of the inexplicable defeat just now and felt that he was like a 3-year-old child in the hands of the other party. All his strength had landed on empty air. It was most likely that this person's martial arts were much stronger than his own. While he was in a daze, he suddenly felt a burning pain on his cheeks. He opened his eyes in a daze and discovered a familiar ceiling. Oh no, it was the roof of the tent. His gaze shifted downwards. What he saw was not the relieved military doctor or the pleasantly surprised soldiers. Instead, it was someone he didn't know, a military officer. At this moment, he was in a daze. He blinked his bell-like eyes and asked, "Who are you?" The man smiled warmly and said, "Nephew, I'm your uncle." Since when did father have such a young brother? He thought about it carefully and realized that there wasn't any. Then, his mind cleared up a little. This bastard, he must be messing with me. Anger rose in his heart, and he reached out to grab the other party's hair. "How dare you?" Before he could finish a sentence, he saw the other party's hand on his wrist. Then, the world began to spin. In the blink of an eye, he flipped over and was pressed onto the bed. Sun Lang snickered and said, "Huh. The very brave, huh?" This familiar feeling, this helpless despair, Qin Yunshuang's mind cleared up for a moment. Shocked and angry, he shouted, "So if it's you." He immediately shouted, "Come." Before he could finish, his head was pressed down onto the bed. He immediately swallowed the word person into his stomach. Sun Lang said slowly, "Is your father still practicing shooting the tide in these 2 years? Has his internal injury healed?" Qin Yunshuang wanted to curse out loud, but his heart shook when he heard this. He cried out involuntarily, "How did you know?" Only the sons of the first wife knew this secret of their fathers. The sea dragon king Qian Miao's heaven-shaking and earth-shattering inner strength and his unstoppable archery skills were all trained in the sea. The year he was crowned as an adult, he had seen the scene of his father shooting the tide. At that time, his father was like a god, with a bow and arrow in the face of the raging tide. Once the arrow was released, a sharp aura wrapped around the arrow as it roared and shot, cutting the raging tide, shaking it into pieces of jade that fluttered in the sky like a heavy downpour. Arrow after arrow, tide after tide, using his own strength to contend against the wonders of heaven and earth. One man and one bow, only a tall figure that did not move, and the tide that returned time and time again without any success. After being crowned, he was an adult. He had to have his own responsibilities and could officially pursue his own dreams. It was the time when a youth thirsted for power and wanted to establish his career. When he saw this unparalleled power for the first time, he was so excited that he trembled because the one who had this power was his father. The father's martial arts would naturally be the son's sooner or later. But what happened next scared him so much that his hands and feet turned cold. His father turned around and spat out a mouthful of blood. He hurriedly went forward to support him and found that his father's hands were trembling nonstop. His father's voice was very low as he said, "This is the price." Such a tyrannical and fast advancement martial arts had a price to pay. But the Sky Demon disaster wreaked havoc in the world. The lives of the common people could not be saved, but the families old and weak needed to be protected. But the Qin family's reputation needed to be protected, so this price had to be paid. Bringing him here to watch the tide was not to show his father's power and prestige, but to tell him his father's sacrifice and pain. This was something a grown man needed to know. So the brothers were all working hard to practice martial arts. They wanted to take over their father's burden as soon as possible so that their father would not need to use the sky-shaking bow again. But it seemed that the heavens had eyes. When a father and son reunited these 2 years, they were pleasantly surprised to find that their father's pulse and complexion were much better than before. It seemed that his internal injuries were slowly improving and healing. They were pleasantly surprised and asked their father if he had any miraculous medicine or expert to help him. Their father hesitated for a long time before solemnly telling them that an old friend from the army had helped him to improve his martial arts and the key to resolving his internal injuries. Finally, he did not die too early. But when they asked for his name, their father muttered to himself for a long time and hesitated for a long time before finally making up his mind. He said that it was no longer suitable to say that name, because many people did not want him to be remembered. But the Qin family had to remember that person's name and his achievements for generations to come. One day, the heroic spirit's hidden name and hidden achievements would be able to see the light of day once again. Thus, their father brought his sons to a heavily guarded secret underground room. There was a person's memorial tablet inside. He had them kneel down and then told them the story of that person. A peerless general whose achievements surpassed his generation. A peerless saint reborn in the world. He died without a sound. Thinking of this past, Qian Yuanshuang suddenly realized that his heart was beating very fast. He seemed to realize something, but he did not dare to believe it. This was simply too. He also remembered that before he was conscripted to serve under General Tensei, his elder brother had come to visit him and relayed a meaningful message from their father. You must know how to repay kindness and properly serve under General Tensei. Know how to repay kindness. Know how to repay kindness. This was what their father often admonished them, and it was also what he had told them that day in the secret room. His name was no longer suitable to be spoken, and this kindness had no meaning in making it public. The Qian family had to engrave this kindness in their hearts and pass it down forever, waiting for an opportunity. They must know how to repay kindness. General Tensei did not owe the Qian family any kindness. Their father had said that the matter of the Grand Marshal was related to Empress, and even the Emperor. His achievements surpassed his generation, so he was suspected by the Emperor. As for General Tensei, transferring him to his camp, it was even more malicious. Then this gratitude must be referring to someone else, must be referring to their father must have realized something. That was why he told him to know how to repay kindness. Qian Yuanshuang's heart was beating wildly, and his limbs were weak for a moment. He slowly, tentatively, and even with a slightly flattering tone, he asked slowly, "May I ask this, old uncle, how are Instructor Lin and class leader Shui related to you?" The back of his head was slapped again. Children should not ask about adult matters. Qian Yuanshuang was in pain, and his heart was even more bewildered. He said again, another slap. "My surname is Sun." His heart shook, and he cautiously confirmed again. "Our Jinwu camp is 4th class horse run." Qian Yuanshuang's heart beat even faster. He swallowed a mouthful of saliva and asked his last question. "Other than my father, there is another person who is practicing martial arts in the tide. His name is Yanghua. This Yanghua is second-hand dragon cavalry." Not a single word was missing. Although he did not know what a 4th class horse run was, although he did not know who Yanghua was, although he did not know what a second-hand dragon cavalry meant, he did not miss a single word. These were the words his father had told him. Other than his father, there was only one person who knew. He took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Grand Marshal." Sun Lang grunted and let go of his hand, but not anymore. Qian Yuanshuang exerted force with both hands and rolled off the couch. Kneeling on the ground, a lowly General Qian Yuanshuang greets benefactor. Sun Lang looked at him. After a while, he said faintly, "It's rare that your father still remembers me. It's rare that he has the heart to tell you. It seems you know a lot, Rise." Qian Yuanshuang felt himself being lifted up by an invisible force. He stood up and said respectfully, "There must be a lot of people who remember you. There must be a lot of people like my father who hope for your return." "Hope for my return? Why would I return?" Sun Lang suddenly thought of Qian Miao, that hero who was born because of the times. In times of chaos and war, there would always be some heroes who would appear. They were passionate and righteous, and had a pure heart. In times of peace and prosperity, people like this would be suppressed by the world and the nobility until they could not raise their heads. They would be unknown for their entire lives. But in times of war, they would have the opportunity to realize their dreams and ambitions. Because this was a battle of protection, a battle of justice. Only a battle of justice could give birth to true heroes. He was like this. Old was like this. There were also many people like this. In the past, he was also like this. But now, Qian Miao and the others, did they really hope for him to return? If it was just to take back the honor and reputation that he deserved, to go back and create a prosperous era with them, then they would definitely bow their heads and listen to his orders, willing to be ordered around. But it was not like this. Seeing Qian Yuanchuang's respectful appearance, Sun Lang hesitated. The respect on the other party's face was not fake. He could imagine what kind of image he had in the other party's heart in Qian Miao's teachings. This hesitation only lasted for a moment before it was forcefully suppressed by Sun Lang. He suddenly asked, "I want you to gather soldiers and horses right now and charge with me in Empress Tensei's tent and cut off her dog head. Do you dare?" Qian Yuanchuang's entire body trembled, a look of astonishment appearing on his face. Sun Lang narrowed his eyes and asked with a smile that was not a smile, "Do you dare?" This nephew hesitated for a moment, and then a resolute expression appeared on his face as he replied in a powerful and resonant voice, "As long as Second General Lin Shui dares, I also dare." Sun Lang slapped him again. "You're really fucking brave." Chapter 532. This nephew of his was really naughty. Sun Lang looked at him from the corner of his eyes. He felt that this simple-looking, unshaven, and seemingly loyal guy actually had a heart as sharp and cunning as a fawn. He sneered, "I can't believe that Qian Lashi could have a son like you." Qian Lashi? Nephew Gu was stunned for a moment before he realized that this might be his father's nickname back then, but he didn't know the story behind it. It seemed to have no rhyme or reason. However, now wasn't the time to care about that kind of thing. He smiled shamelessly. "Uncle, I'm your junior. You can't hurt me." He peeked at Sun Lang's face and carefully flattered, "You're so good at martial arts. You didn't even need a second move to deal with me. If you wanted to kill Empress, would you need me?" Sun Lang didn't say anything. He just snorted lightly. Nephew Qian was indeed a ruthless character despite his rough appearance. He knew what was going on just by observing Sun Lang's body language. He hurriedly moved a stool from the side and helped Sun Lang sit down. He carefully smiled and said, "Uncle, what instructions do you have for me this time?" Sun Lang rolled his eyes and said, "I just told you to take Empress's head. Why aren't you doing anything?" Nephew Gu smiled and said, "Uncle, you're just joking with me. How can I take it seriously? My father always praises you in front of us. He says you're unparalleled, righteous, and chivalrous. How can you push your brother's family into the fire pit, right?" Sun Lang glanced at him with a smile that wasn't a smile. "Io, you've learned how to tease people. Then, nephew, since you're so smart, why don't you guess why I'm looking for you?" Nephew Gu was indeed smart. He rolled his eyes and had an idea. He carefully said, "Nephew Gu, I guess it's probably about General Lin and General Shui." As soon as he finished speaking, he was hit on the head again. It hurt a little. He held his head and said, "Uncle, my father doesn't hit me much. Did I say something wrong?" "Nonsense." Sun Lang slammed the table and said sternly, "Are you kidding me? This is my family's business. Do I need to ask you for help?" "Huh? If you don't want my help, why did you panic when I mentioned them? Your two unmarried wives are in the camp. If you weren't panicking, you would have hugged them both and rolled into bed. Why did you come here to make things difficult for me? Are you kidding me? Although my military achievements and martial arts are far inferior to yours, both of us are soldiers. I was ordered to go out and leave home for a few months at a time. I was so bored that my eyes were green. As soon as I got home, I hugged my wife and nibbled on her. That night, I had to work until the second half of the night. So, according to my experience, if a man doesn't pounce on his wife and kiss her after 2 years, but instead tries to avoid her, he must have a guilty conscience. Most likely, he secretly raised a child outside. In that instant, Nephew Gu replayed the details of Detective Conan's case in his mind. He had already seen through everything and had guessed most of the truth of the matter. However, it was one thing to guess correctly and another to say it out loud. He wasn't an idiot. This uncle of his was obviously not easy to get along with. He was cunning and held grudges. Moreover, he could beat him up at any time. Thus, he could only hide his disdain and laughter in the bottom of his heart. He lowered his head and said, "Yes. You're the Casanova of a generation. You've never failed in your pursuit. You're a world-famous playboy. Instructor Lin and Leader Shui are already firmly in your hands. They can't run away, Sun Lang nodded. Yes, Nephew Gu. These two sentences of flattery are quite appropriate. He waved his hand and gestured for Qian Yuanshuang to sit down. He said seriously, Uncle, I've come to you today because I want you to do two things. The first thing is to instruct your subordinates to be in Navy for me. Hearing this, Qian Yuanshuang patted his chest and said, Don't worry, Uncle. Our suppression martial camp originated from the 8 Capitals Army. We're tigers and lions on the road and dragons in the sea. Our skills on the water are naturally top-notch. It's not this Navy. Sun Lang waved his hand and said mysteriously, I want you to mobilize your subordinates to carry out a commercial flattery and disturb the morale of the army. Do you dare? Nephew Gu was stunned at first. He blinked and understood his uncle's meaning. He lowered his voice and said with a subtle expression, You mean you want me to spread news about you in the camp? Sun Lang nodded. Yes, yes. I beat all of you up not long ago. Right now, the morale of the army is in turmoil. Everyone is at a loss and doesn't know why they lost so miserably, he smiled. Although they're elites, they're still human. They can still fight back bravely after suffering a normal defeat. However, they must feel very helpless after suffering such a great defeat. At this time, the mentality of these arrogant soldiers will change. They urgently need a reasonable and convincing reason to explain the strength of the enemy and prove that it's not because they're useless. Qian Yuanshuang had fainted earlier and didn't know what other big things Sun Lang had done. He only understood when Sun Lang mentioned it. He slapped the table excitedly. Yes, that's true, and you're one of us. It's not embarrassing to be beaten up by the Grand Marshal. After all, it's you. In the end, he asked, was the beating very fierce? This kid still didn't know that the camp had been hit by an airburst biochemical bomb. Sun Lang smiled. You'll know when you go out later. Remember not to laugh. You'll get beaten up. Qian Yuanshuang nodded, as if he understood. Suddenly, he remembered something. Uncle, I asked my subordinates to spread rumors. What if the Empress catches us and says that we're shaking the morale of the army and want to kill people? Sun Lang sneered. It's fine. I'll go visit a few of my nephews later. Let's do it together. By the time she comes back to her senses, the rumors will be flying everywhere. This camp full of arrogant soldiers has experience and background. Although she's a Tensei general, she won't dare to kill all of you. She'll offend half of the military officials in one go unless she's crazy. Nephew Gu was relieved. He asked again, Uncle, what's the second thing? Sun Lang pondered for a moment. The second thing isn't too difficult. You know that my opponent this time is that woman. No matter how much trouble we cause, the key to solving the problem is still that woman. But that woman is too despicable and cowardly. She doesn't dare to fight me one-on-one. Instead, she found helpers to interfere with my sacred duel with her. This is very infuriating. Qian Yuanshuang was surprised. Could it be that Empress has some peerless expert by her side? Uncle, you've already observed your nephew's martial arts. If even you can't deal with him, how can I? Sun Lang said with a serious face, No, Nephew Gu. This isn't a matter of rank. It's a matter of rank. Her helper's martial arts are only a so-so, but Nephew Gu wasn't stupid at all. He immediately guessed Sun Lang's intention. He said with a face full of fear, Uncle, the two helpers you're talking about, aren't they Instructor Lin and Leader Shui? I wouldn't have noticed if you didn't mention it. Sun Lang said with a face full of surprise. It's really them. Coincidence my ass. Isn't this just for the two of them? Qian Yuanshuang complained loudly in his heart, but he didn't dare to say it out loud. He had a bad feeling about this. He could only say with a trembling voice, So, you want me to? Sun Lang patted him on the shoulder with a kind expression, as if saying, Uncle thinks highly of you. It's very simple. Help me lure them out, and then find a way to hold them back. General Qian's body trembled. After a moment of hesitation, a solemn and resolute expression appeared on his face. With a resolute expression, he shouted, Uncle, why don't you just kill me? Sun Lang's expression didn't change. He said with a smile, This child only knows how to talk nonsense. You're my nephew, so how can I kill you? If you don't want to do it, then don't. It's fine, I'm not that kind of person. With that, he reached out and lifted Qian Yuanshuang up like a little chick. The burly General Qian didn't dare resist. He said uneasily, "Uncle, what are you doing?" Sun Lang smiled. "Since you're not willing to cooperate, then I'll have to change my method. I'll directly create a terrifying atmosphere in the camp. For example, I'll strip a general naked and hang him on a flagpole from time to time to increase the fear in everyone's hearts. When that happens, everyone will be in danger and the morale of the army will drop. Empress won't be able to do anything. Nephew Gu couldn't help but shiver at the thought of himself being hung on a flagpole naked. After all, he was a young man who had achieved success at a young age. He valued his pride and face very much. If that really happened, he would probably be laughed at for the rest of his life. It would be better to just kill him. He begged loudly, "Uncle, please spare me. Uncle, please spare me. For my father's sake, please spare me. Can't we find someone else? I have a lot of people on my side who don't get along with our side. Hanging them up is satisfying. Hanging me up is killing each other. Wow, you're so vicious. You actually tried to divert the trouble. Despicable, really despicable," Sun Lang said with a look of disdain. "You can say that Angela is despicable." He reached out to pull General Qian's clothes. "No, you have to change your bad habit of harming others for your own benefit. Come, don't move. Uncle will help you let go of yourself. It feels good to hang a flagpole and brag." Qian Yuanshuang realized that Sun Lang was actually serious. He panicked and shouted, Okay, Uncle, I'll agree. Okay, I'll agree, okay?" Only then did Sun Lang put him back on the chair. He even helped him tidy up his clothes. He patted his shoulder and said, "That's right, Nephew Gu. Do well for Uncle. When the time comes, you won't miss out on the benefits. Nephew Gu, I don't want to talk to Uncle. Hey, you're still acting cute. Be good. Let's discuss the details of the plan first." Chapter 533. While Sun Lang and his eldest nephew were scheming in the Zhenwu camp, they were not idle here either. When Sun Lang rushed into the main tent of the Central Army, Louis Wu happened to be giving advice inside. Unsurprisingly, he was caught in the crossfire and was almost cooked by the fire at the city gate. He was beaten senseless by Sun Lang's righteous fist that came from the sky. Then he fell out of the tent like a wild goose falling from the sand. He was unconscious until he was found and rescued. A soldier like Louis Wu was enough for a military doctor to take care of him. He was groggy and felt someone put something on his face. When he opened his eyes, the murderous intent in his eyes scared the person beside him. Fortunately, the military doctor in charge of treating Louis Wu was a veteran. Many of the soldiers' eyes after waking up were as ferocious as wild beasts. Louis Wu looked coldly at the military doctor. What happened? For the sake of Lu Tsong's military status, the military doctor maintained good manners and said, "You are Lu Tsong, right? You were sneakily attacked by bandits and are unconscious. I just performed acupuncture on you." Bandits? The memory from before slowly came to his mind. He remembered that Empress's expression suddenly changed. Then there was the sound of wind in the sky. His whole body was in pain, and he saw stars. He could not remember anything after that. The military doctor said as he packed up the medicine box, "Louis Wu's martial arts are really powerful. The bandits' martial arts are extremely powerful. Tonight, there are at least 15 or 16 generals in the camp who have been beaten unconscious. Some have light injuries, some have serious injuries, but all of them are unconscious. The bandits' martial arts are high. It's amazing that Louis Wu woke up so quickly." However, Louis Wu, who had been flattered, did not look pleased at all. Instead, he suddenly clenched his fist and a strong murderous intent flashed through his eyes. However, he seemed to have thought of something and his tense body slowly relaxed. The military doctor still did not know that he had taken a trip around the gates of hell. He packed up the medicine box and saluted. "Lord Liu, you only need to rest for a while. You only suffered some superficial injuries. I've already left a prescription. 3 times a day, A doctor will send it over. I'll go treat the other soldiers now." Louis Wu was still in a daze. He forced himself to say a few polite words and sent the doctor away. Then he left the tent and was greeted with a strong breath of samsara chi of the 5 grains. F*CK. What the F*CK is this smell? This strong and powerful smell instantly cleared his mind. He looked around, grabbed a few soldiers, and carefully asked them what had happened. However, the basic level of education of the soldiers was not very high. Moreover, in this huge wave that had engulfed the whole camp, they were only a small splash in the water. They could not see the whole picture, so they did not understand the cause and effect of the matter. The explanations given were also messy and full of bizarre mythical colors. For example, they could not understand or explain the explosion that had brought countless filth and fear. After all, with their simple thoughts and concepts, they could not imagine that someone would be crazy enough to make a barrel of explosives filled with some kind of unknown substance and then throw it over the camp to explode. Their explanation for the deafening explosion and the terrifying rain that followed was that Grandpa Lay accidentally destroyed the toilet of the heavenly court. Lay your father's watermelon. For some reason, Louis Wu did not believe in ghosts and gods at all. Since this was the case, although it was hard to believe, there was only one person who could do such a thing. It's too scary. It seems that he has become such an unscrupulous person. He walked around the camp and asked a lot of soldiers. He slowly pieced together all the answers into a complete and real picture. Only then did he finally understand what kind of horrifying battle and legend had happened in this camp during the time he was unconscious. At least, Empress finally believes that that person can't be defeated with pure force. He muttered to himself, "Brother Zhang's prediction is indeed correct. Humph, the ruler suspects the court. The bow is put away after the birds are killed. The game rules have been around for more than 1,000 years. The power of the ruler and the officials are fighting both openly and secretly. Either the tyrannical overlord overthrows the dynasty, or the wise ruler monopolizes the power, both the open and the hidden shadows of swords. Until today, there is finally an exception." A sarcastic smile appeared on his face. It was a very satisfying smile. The ruler wanted his officials to die, but most of the officials were not idiots. They had to die. They really had to die. Before this trip, Brother Zhang asked me to do my best to facilitate the negotiation between Empress and that person. It would be best if we could form an alliance. Even if it's a temporary alliance, it would be good. He muttered to himself, "If it really succeeds, I'm afraid it'll be a concession from the imperial court. They'll pinch their noses and admit that Ming Zhou is under his control. From there, everything will be settled peacefully on the table. Then there will be a series of exchanges and games, and then the Grand Marshal will be welcomed back to the capital. This is probably Brother Zhang's goal. Since we can't defeat him with pure force, we can only think of other ways. Brother Zhang seems to want to facilitate this and welcome that person back to the capital. Is this his goal? But no matter what, the legendary person has finally returned to the place where he belongs after leaving the court for 2 years. However, many things have changed in these 2 years. It's enough to corrupt heroes and change their ideals. What will happen when he returns? Lu Qinjun said. Then he raised his head. Something called ambition flashed in his eyes and burned with a fanatical flame. He clenched his fists. Turmoil will rise again. It's time for heroes to use their martial arts. He took a deep breath and strode toward the central military tent. Although he felt that it was difficult to communicate with that temperamental woman, he still had to go. The closer he got to the central military tent, the stricter the security became. Fortunately, the position he was attached to was Chao Kanjun, a soldier of Tensei province. It could be said that he was a direct subordinate of Empress, so he was quickly allowed to pass after his identity was verified. Along the way, there were vigilant eyes watching him. He walked calmly until he arrived at the central military tent. From afar, he saw 2 figures standing guard on both sides of the tent. Both of them were dressed in martial attire. One of them held a Fengtian halberd, and the other held a snake spear. Their eyes fell on Louis Wu, causing Liu Kanjun to stop breathing. So powerful, he thought. Although one of the two gatekeeping generals was wearing a mask and the other was wearing a full helmet, Liu Kanjun was able to recognize them at first glance. Firstly, the weapons were there. Secondly, because of the person in the north, he had been paying attention to these two female generals these days. Invincible Lin Daiyu and the reincarnated ghost hero Xue Baochai. Because of someone's legacy, the two of them had become the two people with the deepest backgrounds in the army of heaven's origin. The nephew of the empress had only revealed his desire for the empress, but he had already been attacked by a storm. As a result, it was useless for him to escape back to his fief. In the end, some daring old general of the army of heaven's origin came to his doorstep and killed his entire family. After the incident, all the officials and generals in the imperial court protected him and refused to back down. They regarded the incident as an accident and did not even want to find a scapegoat. They refused to give the empress any face. However, Empress could do nothing about it. His Majesty's attitude was also very intriguing. This was because the intense reaction of the majority of the important officials in the court was not so much to protect Xue Baochai, but to demonstrate the dissatisfaction and resentment of the old generals of Tianyuan. The pitiful marquis had become a punching bag. It was rather pitiful. This was also why the emperor's attitude was ambiguous. He knew that the matter had been handled very improperly, but there was nothing he could say. In the face of the majority of the court, there were times when the sovereign's authority had to yield. After all, the emperor was the most realistic and rational creature in the world. Between face and substance, the latter was much more important. Losing a bit of face was nothing. A marquis was nothing. He could even make Xue Baochai and Lin Daiyu rise rapidly. He could even make the Rongguo residents and even the Ningguo residents enjoy endless glory. After all, that person was already dead. As long as he was dead, everything could be discussed. But now, that person was not dead, and his attitude toward the imperial court was not at all friendly. If that was the case, then the fun would be huge. And you? He turned his gaze to Lin Daiyu and Xue Baochai. Will you be happy or sad? Your man has returned, but he has become a traitor. Just what kind of choice will you make? I am very much looking forward to it. He respectfully bowed. General Lin, General Xue, I am Louis Wu, a soldier of Tensei Province. I have an important matter to discuss with the general. Please pass on a message for me. On the left, Lin Daiyu, who was wearing heavy armor and tightly wrapped around herself, wore a ferocious tiger and leopard mask. In an icy voice, she said, "Your eyes, what were you mocking us for?" So powerful. Louis Wu felt awkward and hurriedly denied it. I do not dare. General, please do not joke. The snake spear in Lin Daiyu's hand slightly leaned forward. Her eyes were cold. Speak. Mother of Asterisk her. Did this woman not understand the slightest bit of the ways of the world? At this moment, Xue Baochai on the other side took 2 steps forward. In a soft voice, she said, Louis Wu, my sister's temperament is somewhat cold and intelligent. She speaks without thinking. Please do not mind. Pin, go in and pass on the message. Lin Daiyu said coldly, I will not go. I do not like that woman. She does not have good intentions. Also, do not call me Pin. I am not your sister. If you want to go, you go. When she said this, she deliberately glanced at Louis Wu. Louis Wu saw a very unpretentious intention in her eyes. After Xue Baochai goes in, I will beat you. General Xue had been her sister for so many years. She saw through her sister's intentions at a glance. She helplessly shook her head. In her voice, there was a bit of deliberate coquettishness. Sister, can you just go for a while? Lin Daiyu was silent for a moment. She glanced at Louis Wu and turned to enter the tent. Immediately, her rigid voice sounded from inside. General of Tensei, Louis Wu requests an audience. Pass on. Chapter 534. He had to admit that Xue Baochai's personality was much better than Lin Daiyu's. Louis Wu thought so from the bottom of his heart. Even if this woman was wearing a goose feather light armor, holding a sky piercer, a pair of bows on her waist, and a quiver of arrows on her back, she could use the speed of 2 arrows in one breath to shoot out arrows at a uniform speed to harvest lives. She could also use the sky piercer to directly cut off the enemy's head. Whether it was in terms of military merits or individual kills, she was not inferior to Lin Daiyu, who was known to be invincible. But even if such a woman with outstanding military exploits stood in front of you, armed to the teeth with a lethal weapon, and had such a frightening nickname like Ghost Hero Reincarnated, you would still feel that she was a good woman for some reason. She was not arrogant or aggressive at all. You could not feel her emotional changes and could not imagine her angry look. She was like an eternally calm lake with a smile on her face. She said with concern, "A lowly general heard that when the bandits attacked the camp, they first attacked General Tensei. Fortunately, Lord Liu was there and fought hard to prevent the enemy from succeeding. You bravely protected your master and are loyal and sincere. A lowly general admires you. How is Lord Liu's injury? Are you okay?" Her tone was calm and sincere without any sarcasm. It seemed that she was sincerely concerned about him. Few men in the world could refuse the kindness of a peerless beauty. No wonder the short-lived marquis liked Xue Baochai and not Lin Daiyu. He thought so in his heart. Then he replied, "I'm sorry. I'm not good enough to be of help. Martial arts can be improved, but temperament is hard to come by." Lord Liu was able to rush to the main tent immediately after waking up. His loyalty is evident. I admire him very much. Xue Baochai paused and said softly, "Lord Liu, please don't mind what happened just now. My sister was not like this before. Since her late husband passed away, she was a little. Alas, this low sigh was filled with sorrow and sorrow. It was almost the most intense emotional change this woman had ever experienced. It could even affect the mood of others. Liu Sanjuan's heart was shaken. For a moment, he couldn't tell what he was feeling. He was infected by Xue Baochai's sadness, but he couldn't help but feel happy for her because the late husband she spoke of was actually not dead. He even wondered what kind of expression that always smiling face would have when she reunited with that person. For some reason, he suddenly said, "General Xue, you don't have to be too sad." Sometimes, as he spoke up to hear, his heart trembled. He realized that something was wrong and immediately shut his mouth. At this moment, the tent door opened and Lin Daiyu came out. She said coldly, "She asked you to come in." Liu Kanjun felt that the way Xue Baochai looked at him had become very meaningful. He was a little flustered. Now that he saw Lin Daiyu come out, he naturally couldn't ask for anything more. He hurriedly cupped his hands to the two of them and walked towards the entrance of the tent. But once he panicked, it was bad. He forgot to take precautions. Just as Liu Kanjun passed by Instructor Lin, a cold light flashed in Lin Daiyu's eyes. The snake spear in her hand moved as if nothing had happened and immediately tripped Liu Yiwu's footsteps. When the adjunct sensed it, his right leg had already stepped out and his calf kicked the hard body of the spear. He felt a sharp pain in his calf, and his body quickly lost balance. He stumbled into the large tent and immediately fell to the ground, wailing miserably. Then, he heard the whispered conversation behind him. "Pinner, it's not my fault. He tripped himself." "Fuck." He crawled up in a somewhat sorry state and raised his head to see Empress Tensei sitting on the main seat. The Empress's expression didn't seem very good. That's right. He had fainted early and didn't see what happened later. He didn't believe that the man in the north would chat with His Highness Empress after knocking him out. What happened? Did he hit him? Did he tease him? Did he humiliate him? Or did he take advantage of him? The fire of gossip in Liu Sanjuan's heart burned fiercely, but he was still a man of self-discipline. He lowered his head to prevent his thoughts from being seen through, and respectfully saluted. "This official Liu Yiwu greets your highness." The emperor's concubine immediately scolded, "You stupid pig. Fuck, that Lin Daiyu doesn't play by the rules. What can I do? I'm also very desperate." But it wasn't a wise idea to talk back to the leader. Although he was scolded, he still had to confess gloomily, "I'm incompetent and weak in martial arts." I've disappointed your highness. I'm talking about your stupidity. What does bad martial arts have to do with stupidity? Empress said coldly. Idiot, you were tricked by Shue Baochai with just a few casual questions. You men are all bad. Louis Wu's heart shook. He suddenly raised his head and said in surprise, What? Then he subconsciously looked in the direction of the tent door. Don't look. They can't hear it now. Empress looked at the confused Louis Wu and snorted. Use your pig brain to think about what she asked you. Louis Wu was also a resourceful person. It was just that he had been beaten up before, so he was a little dazed. Moreover, Shue Baochai was too confusing, so he didn't pay attention for a moment. Now that he thought about the situation just now, he finally understood. He stamped his feet and said, Ouch. Shue Baochai was tricking him. She knew that he was in the central tent before Empress was attacked. She took the opportunity to confirm it just now. At that time, it was already late, and Empress was a woman. As a soldier, if he didn't have something important to do, or if he wasn't a trusted subordinate, he couldn't go to the central tent at such a late time. He was the first person besides Empress to face the attacker directly. He immediately ran here after waking up. He had just confirmed it. Furthermore, there was something wrong with his expression. Even though he had been knocked unconscious by highly skilled bandits, and the camp had also been ambushed, there was no confusion, shock, or fear on his face. Instead, he appeared very calm. This meant that he was not completely unaware of this ambush. Then, there was the most terrible operation. She appeared very sorrowful and pointed out her identity as a widow. She was full of worries and sighed in sorrow. She looked very pitiful and was just short of sobbing. Then his mind went blank, and he said these words, Damn, how could she do this? Empress looked at his stupid appearance, and a trace of disdain flashed across her face. She sneered, Do you think Shue Baochai is easy to deal with? She is so smart that she has seen through everything. That's why she doesn't fight. If you think she's a good person, you are wrong. Otherwise, why do you think my foolish cousin ended up with his entire family wiped out? He did provoke someone he shouldn't provoke. Once some people have the intention to kill, they won't stop until all the future troubles are eliminated. Louis Wu's back was already covered in cold sweat. That poor Marquis coveted Shue Baochai, and as a result, his whole family was completely wiped out. His father, who was the emperor's uncle, also suffered a small part of the anger of the civil and military officials in the court. Many people took the opportunity to hit him when he was down, so he was still hiding in his fief and didn't even dare to go out. Empress's prestige and influence plummeted, and her relationship with the courtiers was irreparable. Even the other relatives of the emperor were implicated. Most importantly, everyone learned a lesson and came to a consensus. There were two people who could not be touched. From then on, she was as safe as Mount Tai, whether it was herself or the family behind her. Indeed, it seemed to be so. Although that matter was caused by the old generals of Tianyuan, the scale was too great. The generals of various mountains were linked together in a short period of time, and even affected the whole country, and the public opinion was constantly fermenting. If there was no one behind this, he wouldn't believe it. Damn. Shue Baochai's soft voice seemed to ring in his ears, and he couldn't help but shiver. He still couldn't accept it. How did she know I knew about that matter? Empress looked at him, as if she was looking at a pig. She was just suspicious and casually asked you, Is there any loss? Liu Qianjun patted his head hard. He was directly punched in the head by Sun Lang, and now he felt a dull pain. He thought hard and felt even more panicked. Then doesn't that mean she already knows that her husband is still alive? Empress suddenly became silent. After a long time, she said softly, It's better to say that she has always believed it. Even if there is no evidence, she still believes it. It's purely her instinct as a wife. In this world, unless she sees a complete corpse with her own eyes, which wife is willing to believe that her husband is dead? Liu Qianjun heard a bit of sadness in her words. Maybe it was an illusion. But what he should be concerned about now was obviously not this problem. Liu Qianjun frowned and said, No matter what, Shue Baochai is already very suspicious. What should we do, Your Highness? What should we do? Emperor Concubine let out a cold laugh. Although you foolishly exposed this matter, it also saved me a lot of effort. I was just worrying about how to secretly reveal this information to them. After all, even if it was me, I would feel disgusted to cry and hug those two women for a hateful man. Louis Wu was startled. You mean? Empress sneered in a low voice. That hateful man. Do you really think I can't do anything to him? I can't kill you, and you don't dare to kill me. Our battle has just begun. Do you think I can't do anything to you? Do you think you have already won? Liu Kanjun seemed to understand Empress's meaning, and his face showed an excited expression. You mean let Lin Daiyu and Shui Baochai? It seemed that the charaba was something that the people liked to see. But soon, Louis Wu felt that something was wrong. He said weakly, Wait, Your Highness. Didn't we already say that we will negotiate with that person and even form an alliance? Empress's eyes turned cold. She swallowed all the words she had said before and said decisively, Negotiate. We can only negotiate after the fight. I don't want to sit at the negotiating table with my tail between my legs. Don't you boast that you are full of wisdom. Didn't Mr. Zhang send you to help me? Think of a way to lure him out, and then let him beat me up. Chapter 535. Liu Kanjun felt a headache coming on. He was punched in the head by Sun Lang, and his wound started to hurt again. Find a way to lure him out? Are you kidding me? Not to mention that he was a famous general of Tianyuan, and his achievements were almost unparalleled. It was difficult to coax him, even if he was lucky enough to succeed, but he felt the pain in his body. He thought of the military camp that seemed to have been ravaged by a tornado. Also, there was the terrible, filthy air and the almost immoral way of fighting. A man who had given up treatment, abandoned the so-called demeanor of a master, and could do anything crazy. You want me to plot against him? Moreover, he had set up a trap for him to bump into his two wives and let him have a taste of the backyard fire in the washboard. Damn, are you kidding me? Even if Lin Daiyu was cold and fierce, even if Shui Baochai was good at scheming, even if the man was guilty, could Lin Daiyu and Shui Baochai kill him? At most, she would vent her anger and throw a tantrum. The matters between husband and wife should be resolved after a round of rolling on the bed. Then what happened next? Then we would be dead. We would definitely be used as a punching bag. It would definitely be like that. Is he going to thank us for this? Thank us for helping him to reconcile with his wives? Are you kidding me? Wait, this seems to be a good idea. But we can't do it in that way. Louis Wu vehemently rejected Empress's proposal in his mind. It seemed that this woman must have just suffered a big loss, so she was angry and wanted to take revenge 100 times over. I have to think of a way. He made up his mind and immediately advised, Your Highness, have you forgotten what I said before? Your greatest enemy is not in the north, but in the south. They're the nobles, your brothers, who are eager to see you fail, eager to see you die. Now the situation is critical. You have to solve the matter in Mingzhou properly to restore the good image in His Majesty's mind. He carefully considered his tone and said carefully, Don't be angry here. After all, even if this plan succeeds, what practical benefits will it bring? The marshal won't suffer any actual losses at all. At most, he'll lose some face. After losing face over there, he'll definitely feel indignant and want to take revenge. There will be many variables and new waves. He felt that his persuasion was already very reasonable. After all, this was a political game, and it involved the throne of the crown prince. Every crown prince who was ambitious should calm down and compromise. After all, that was the supreme position, and it was supreme power. In order to obtain it, no one would mind paying the price. But Empress seemed to have taken the wrong medicine today. She gritted her teeth and said, No. Louis Wu almost jumped up and shouted, Your Highness. No means no. Emperor Concubine gritted her teeth and said, I'm not just venting my anger. This is my first official confrontation with him. Even if I can't obtain a complete victory, I can't suffer a crushing defeat. I have to take back the advantage and win one battle. Even if it's only once, even if I have to deal with his revenge afterwards, I have to win once. I have to see him running away in embarrassment. I have to see his stupid face. I have to win once. I have to tell myself that I can beat him." She stood up and looked at Lu Kanjun. She said coldly, "Do you understand? Otherwise, a seed called failure would slowly start to take root and sprout. It would become an inner demon, constantly reminding himself that he couldn't win. He couldn't win. It was impossible to win. If he couldn't win, then everything would be meaningless. He couldn't get the throne or the country. Since he couldn't get it, why should he care about it?" Lu Kanjun soon understood what Empress meant. He looked at the woman in front of him and soon understood what she meant. She was a general who also shined in the Heaven's Origin sector. She was on par with the legendary marshal back then. Although she had external help, such as the identity of the royal family and the support of the emperor, it was undeniable that this woman had the qualifications to be a ruler. She had her own ideas and knew what she wanted to do. So troublesome. He sighed. He knew that Empress had made up her mind and couldn't be changed. Since he couldn't persuade her, he could only do his duty as a strategist. He organized his thoughts and took a breath. He asked, "In that case, this official will help your highness. However, this official just woke up not long ago and doesn't know what happened during this time. The military books say that only by knowing the enemy and yourself can you win 100 battles. This subordinate needs to understand some things first, whether it's on our side or the enemy." Empress calmed down a little. She nodded and said, "Just ask." Louis Wu pondered for a moment and then asked. Empress answered him one by one. The thinking of wise people was similar. The questions that Lu Yiwu wanted to ask were also the questions that Empress wanted to know. She had already sent people to collect them. After a series of questions and answers, Lu Kanjun went through all the answers in his mind and fell into deep thought. After thinking for a while, he said, "Since the target is the marshal, then we have to start with him. Right now, the enemy is in the dark while we are in the light. Not only does the enemy know Empress II's military system like the back of his hand, he is also very strong. Entering our camp is like entering a place with no one. We can't use force to defeat him, but we have to use strategy." Lu Kanjun raised his head and said to Empress, "Before we decide on a plan, we have to understand two things. One is where he is right now and what he is doing. If we want to understand these two things, we have to first analyze his final goal. All of his actions are to serve his final goal. We have already come to this conclusion before. The marshal divided Ming province, roped in the generals, and nominally occupied the north to stand against the court. However, he didn't openly declare war. This means that he doesn't want to fight. He also wants to use political negotiations to obtain what he wants. Louis Wu came to this conclusion. Speaking of which, it's a bit funny. We want to force him to the negotiating table, and he seems to want to force us to the negotiating table. Both sides have the same goal, but they haven't reached a consensus. They want to fight over who is stronger and who is weaker. Everyone wants to lead the negotiations because this means that they can gain more. Empress's expression cleared up. At least Lu Kanjun was not an idiot. It was just that Xue Baochai was too cunning. Louis Wu spoke with assurance. Since we know his goal, his actions are to continuously weaken our advantage. What is the advantage of your Highness Empress? To put it simply, it's this camp full of elites from the 6 armies. To put it simply, it's the general situation, the identity of the imperial envoy, and the dignity of the court. As long as you successfully reach Ming province with the elites under your command, you will have the absolute general situation. This general situation is called imperial power. It is the power of the most powerful country in the world. It is the supreme merit for winning the Battle of Tianyuan. It is enough to make any fence-sitter lower his head. Lu Kanjun said, "At that time, most of the arrangements made by the marshal will be rendered ineffective. After all, Ming province is not his base. He has no prestige there. He has only achieved the effect of ruling by dividing and roping in and controlling the high-ranking civil and military officials. Once you arrive with the army, whether it's the civil and military officials or the nobles, they will have to consider whether they want to confront the heavenly army directly." Empress nodded slowly. "Exactly. Then, The general will definitely try his best to prevent it from happening. That is his goal, Louis Wu said resolutely, to keep you out of Ming province and a negotiating table out of Ming province so that we can reach an agreement and consensus outside of Ming province. Perhaps there is another way. Empress raised his eyebrow. What way? Or, Liu Kanjun said, he can ask you to leave your army behind and negotiate in Ming province in secret. All in all, the general will not allow the imperial envoy to arrive in Ming province while beating drums and gongs. Otherwise, people's hearts will waver. Empress sneered. You want me to leave my army behind, walk into a trap, and go to Ming province to be slaughtered by him? Do you think I'm that stupid? Liu Yiwu replied, if he attacks the camp every day, turns it into a mess, collapses morale, poisons and sets fires every day, attacks the soldiers, hangs the generals on the flagpoles, causing everyone to feel insecure. Then, he spreads rumors and causes unrest in the army. As long as he drags it out for a while, rumors will spread all over the capital, causing the situation to become more and more unfavorable to you. Sooner or later, you will lose your patience and take the initiative to negotiate. Empress's expression froze. She had to admit that this plan was very effective. With Sun Lang's brain, he would naturally think of it. With his moral integrity, he would naturally do this without any pressure. She gritted her teeth and said, if that's the case, we can't let him succeed. Yes, Liu Kanjun said. Then, the most important question is, where is he right now? Empress said, he led those Slalos to break out of the encirclement and, at this point, she stopped. She had already realized something. Since Sun Lang already had a goal, he couldn't just go back to sleep after causing a ruckus. No, it was possible, but she looked at Louis Wu. What will he do? Liu Kanjun didn't answer immediately. Instead, he fell in a deep thought. The filth exploded and injured more than 10 generals. Their injuries varied, but they all fainted. Then, he led 21 Slalos to sweep through the camp and defeated all the troops, but he didn't hurt anyone. He didn't hurt anyone. Ouch! An idea suddenly flashed through his mind. He suddenly raised his head. He didn't hurt anyone. His goal isn't just to demonstrate, nor is it just to break the army's morale, but Empress also suddenly stood up. The two of them looked at each other and said in unison, he wants to spread rumors and buy people's hearts. Liu Kanjun said quickly, how to buy people? How to spread rumors? The spread of rumors needs the first person to spread them, and the fastest way is... Empress gritted her teeth and said, those generals. Some of them are his friend's nephews. Liu Kanjun nodded. Yes, Your Highness, where's the roster? Let's quickly arrange people to intercept. Why do we need to arrange people? Don't we have the best candidate? Empress's eyes flashed with a malicious light. Go and call Shui Baoqian. Chapter 536. Call Shui Baoqian. Empress said. Then she sat back down, picked up the brush, laid out the paper, and began to write names on the paper, one after another. Her eyes flashed with a sharp light. Louis Wu did not even need to look to know that Empress was writing the names of all the generals in the camp. Then she would investigate and analyze them one by one to deduce who Sun Lang would look for. As for how to investigate and analyze, it was very simple. These generals came from the 6 armies of Tianyuan. Their backgrounds are not small. As long as one knew their fathers or backers, one could infer whether they had a relationship with Sun Lang. As a general of Tensei, it was too easy to know the relationship of the Grand Marshal back then. Liu Kanjun suddenly panicked a little. He vaguely felt that Empress was a little safe this time. Although Empress had already made up her mind that as a counselor, he could only listen to orders and assist, this would undoubtedly anger the person in the north. He did not know what kind of terrible revenge he would suffer. He thought of that soaring foul air, and his heart could not help but jump. Since the Grand Marshal had already done such a crazy thing, he would definitely not mind throwing him into the latrine pit. At this moment, Empress stopped writing, raised her head, and glared at him. What are you standing there for? Facing the same sharp gaze, Liu Kanjun found that he really did not have the courage to refuse. So he could only agree. Full of sadness, he moved to the door of the tent, lifted the curtain, and walked outside. He turned his head and said, "Shwa." There was a thump. A familiar pain came from his calf. Because he was also unprepared, he stumbled and fell out, almost falling on his face again. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Lin Daiyu calmly put away the snake's spear. Pinner, tripping twice in a row. This person is really stupid. This bitch. Are you happy to play with me? Soon you will have something even happier to do. Even a clay figurine had some anger, let alone Liu Kanjun. He sneered in his heart, patted the dirt off his body, stood up, and said with a calm expression, "General Shue, His Highness invites you in." Hearing this, Shue Baochai was slightly startled. She first glanced at Lin Daiyu, then immediately turned and entered the tent. Louis Wu felt a chill in his heart. He was so angry that he almost laughed out loud. His Highness was right. This woman was indeed extremely scheming. This time, he didn't even bother apologizing to me. Have you realized what's going on? Was he in such a hurry? At this time, Lin Daiyu's voice sounded again. What are you thinking about? What happened to Shue Baochai? Damn it, I forgot there was another one here. Louis Wu's heart skipped a beat. He glanced at Lin Daiyu and revealed a gentle and appropriate smile. Then he immediately took a big step forward to the right. With a tap of his toes, he rushed into the tent. Inside, Shue Baochai had already stood still and bowed to Empress. Her voice was gentle and calm, and her etiquette was not lacking in the slightest. Louis Wu looked at her back, his heart thumping. If Empress's description was completely correct, then this woman's scheming and methods were rarely seen in the world. Just because a marquis coveted her, this woman, surnamed Shue, took advantage of the situation and stirred up a storm, using the influence of a veteran general of Tianyuan to completely eliminate future troubles. Moreover, she had dealt a heavy blow to the relatives of Empress's maiden family and made them unable to turn the situation around. Such ruthless methods were chilling to think about. Then, since she was so wise and resourceful, how could she not suspect that there was something fishy about her husband's death? After all, there were too many suspicious points about the Battle of the Great Desolate Mountain, and the imperial family's table manners were too unsightly. Then, this was very interesting. She would definitely suspect something, so she would definitely do something. What had she been doing all these years? What had she been thinking? Since she was as smart as Empress said, how could she not have thought of the role Empress had played in the Battle of the Great Desolate Mountain? She could actually bow to Empress, as if nothing had happened. Was she enduring, or did she not care? As his thoughts roamed, Empress put down her brush and calmly said, "General Shue." Shue Baochai calmly replied, "Here." Louis Wu stole glances from the side and felt that the atmosphere between these two women was very strange. Although it was calm, there was actually a turbulent undercurrent. There was hatred, suspicion, enmity, graveness, and even jealousy. While Liu Kanjun couldn't help but sigh in amazement. He had almost forgotten. It seemed that the relationship between Empress and Shue Baochai was rather complicated. And from their previous words, it seemed that Empress was also very wary of Shue Baochai. How would the two of them communicate? How would Empress appoint Shue Baochai? How would she explain the situation to her? How to communicate was rather difficult. After all, General Shue had gone to block the Grand Marshal. How would she explain the cause and effect? How would she be ordered to visit those injured generals? As a strategist who liked to use his brain, Liu Kanjun was used to thinking from another perspective. He put himself in the Emperor's concubine's shoes and thought about how he should talk to Shue Baochai in this kind of situation. After deducing a few times, he realized that he was indeed powerless to deal with such a vigilant woman. He didn't know that Empress would say this. Your husband is not dead. What? Don't get me wrong. It was Liu Kanjun who made such an indecent exclamation. This exclamation was filled with great shock and disbelief, so much so that Shue Baochai turned around to look at him. Empress's expression was so cold that it was about to freeze. Shame on you. Get out of here. It had to be said that because of this sentence, the solemn atmosphere between Empress and Shui Guixiong no longer existed. The air suddenly became quiet, and everything became very awkward. Lu Sanjuan's expression was subtle as he slowly moved out. He felt very annoyed for a moment. Oh my gosh, my mouth. He wanted to slap himself a few times. While annoyed, he opened the door of the tent. Dong! There was a familiar sharp pain in his calf bone again. It was still the familiar strength, the familiar feeling, and the familiar demon dog crying. Lin Dayu took back the snake spear as if nothing had happened and looked down at Lu Kanjun condescendingly, as if she was looking at an idiot. Are you an idiot? Without another word, Lu Kanjun quickly got up and ran far away like a wisp of smoke. I can't get too close to this woman, or I will be beaten. In the tent, Empress and Shui Baochai looked at each other, and no one spoke. After a long time, Empress broke the silence and repeated, "Your husband is not dead." Shui Baochai lowered her eyes and said softly, "Oh, he came back and is hiding in this military camp." Shui Baochai was still calm. "Yes." Empress frowned, suppressed the annoyance in his heart, and said faintly, "Don't you want to see him? I have waited for 2 years, and I don't mind waiting a little longer." Shui Baochai looked at Empress and suddenly laughed. "On the contrary, Your Highness seems to be more anxious to see him than I am. Do you miss him so much?" This woman, Empress resisted the urge to pull out the Tianyuan saber and took a deep breath. Now is not the time to be angry. This woman is really smart. In the blink of an eye, she saw through my embarrassing situation and wanted to take the initiative. What a cunning guy. But she sneered in her heart. "Humph, you two stupid women. You claim to be his wife and mourn for him, but you don't know anything. You don't know that the person you regard as your husband has a huge secret in his heart that he hasn't told you from beginning to end. He won't do this, never." Empress looked at Shui Baochai with a smug smile on the corner of his mouth. There was an inexplicable sense of superiority in his heart. "You are a woman after all, stupid woman." She slowly said, "I have just seen him, so I don't miss him so much. I think we'll have a chance to meet again in the future. But you haven't seen him for a long time. Do you miss him very much? I don't know if he is doing well, if he is injured, if he eats well, if he is sleeping well. After all, the first person he saw was me, and it has been so long, but I haven't seen him come see you. This person is really bad." Shui Baochai softly said, "He has always been like this." Public affairs always come before private affairs. As he said, he worries about the world first and enjoys the world later. He was like this in the past, and he must be like this now. He must be busy trying to make the world more beautiful and peaceful. After all, this is the country that he fought so hard to protect. He is always so selfless, unlike some heartless and unscrupulous people who not only lost their minds, but also burned the bridge after crossing the river. This sarcastic rebuke was very sharp. Empress snorted and then sneered. "Oh, do you think he will return to the countryside and live a quiet life with you after finishing the world affairs? If that's the case, then you're wrong. Listen carefully, Shui Baochai. I'm telling you clearly that he won't go back to Rongwa's mansion, not in this life." Shui Baochai's body slightly trembled. This change fell into Empress's eyes. She laughed even more happily. Shui Baochai was silent for a moment and said lightly, "Oh, could it be that Her Highness the Empress concubine has taken a fancy to my husband and wants to snatch him away to be her husband? Arrogant, your mother." She almost cursed out. After all, being in contact with a certain person would cause one to be infected with this kind of bad habits. The Empress concubine took 2 deep breaths and calmed her anger. Then she smiled and said, "Don't talk nonsense. Shui Baochai, you should be able to tell that I'm not lying." Her eyes flashed with sarcasm. Shui Baochai also fell into silence. Only the sentence just now could shake all her trust and leisure. Empress timely added, "Don't you want to ask him in person? It seems like he wants to hide from you guys completely." Shui Baochai was silent for a long time and finally sighed softly. After all, she was a woman. She slowly said, "Your Highness, please tell me where I am now." There was murderous intent. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.